everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on chapters 42, 43, and 44 of Thousand Autumns. And I'm pretty excited because when we left off last week, Bairong had confronted Shen Qiao in a cave as he was trying to protect young Wushi, who has entered Chi deviation. And some things are about to get heavy. Things are about to get heavy in this series, and I'm curious how far we're going to get in this set of chapters for this week. So yeah, I went back and reread a little bit of the last chapter set right before starting this, and Bairong being like, you know, young Wushi, he doesn't really like you. He just sees you as his plaything. And Shen Qiao is like, well, I still owe him for being so nice. So we're going to see what ends up happening, but I'm recording this a little bit ahead because I was going on a trip last week, so I needed to get this recorded because I literally was getting back the day before this video was supposed to come out, and I knew I was not going to be able to get it all recorded once I got back. So recording this a little bit early, but before we get started, I do want to thank everybody over on Patreon. I am super grateful for the community that I have on Patreon. Everyone there is super kind, super welcoming, super inclusive, and it's really a blessing to have a group of people to chat about anime and donghua and donmai and yaoi and everything else that are so awesome. So everyone on YouTube, y'all are great. You're all wonderful. But if you get a chance, go check out my Patreon and see if it's something that you're interested in. I have multiple tiers down from like ranging from $1 up until $10, which is the philanthropy tier I'm about to mention. And then of course there's a commission tier, but only like 4 people get in on that. So anyway, I do want to give a shout out to the philanthropy tier. They get all the perks of the other tiers, but they get a shout out in my videos as well. And they're super kind because they just throw me a couple extra bucks a month, and that's super, super amazing. So to give thanks to Alexandra Q, Aqua 2000, Amorphosilica, Alex Cornejo, Be Happy, Devorin, Destiny Marie, Dana, Danielle, Diana Williams, Daniel Ichu, as well as Damage 3245, Eric Fisho, Frank Acevedo, as well as James Ghostly Turnip, Jessica Cullen, Jason N, Mia Himi Gopher, Lyndon Elfreya, Murphy, Nicholas, Jack Witt, Poppy, Rose Jennison, Rast, as well as Sugamom, Sunspots, Shimoyama, Translucent Men, Violet Stardust, Yanin, Zero Anti-Zero, Zakiel, and username 123. Thank you all so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. So yeah, that's what got, I've literally waited all day to get to these chapters because I've been on work being like, as soon as I get home, as soon as I do this, I'm going to read Thousand Autumns, chapters 42 through 44, and we're going to be looking at audio drama. Well, I'll be looking at audio drama episode 10 and then talking about it with you all. So super excited about that, but let's not waste any more time, shall we? We are going to get started with A Thousand Autumns, chapters 42, 43, and 44. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do this. Chapter 42, Repaying Kindness. Ooh! Shen Qiao had nothing more to say to her. The bamboo cane in his hand flashed quick as a shadow. It struck with the force of a howling squall, flooding the cramped space with true chi. The torch had long ago been extinguished, and the moonlight spilled inside the cave to interweave with the blows from their palms. Like a river of stars splashed across the sky, painting a vivid, elegant scene. Y'all! That sounds so freaking good. Just the descriptions of this series alone. The translation is exquisite. Wherever their internal chi surged and collided, it cut like a knife. In short order, Liyu's face and hands were sliced and bleeding. Only Yan Wushi continued to sit as before, seeming as impervious as a diamond. True chi and shockwaves buffeted him, but they left little mark. Bairong was impatient, fearful of the unwanted turns the fight could take if it dragged on. With a flick of her sleeves, countless grains of fine powder scattered outward, colorless and devoid of smell, they accompanied her palm blasts. A normal martial artist would have had time to avoid the powder, but no matter how sensitive Shen Qiao's ears were, he couldn't detect it right away. Only a moment later, numbness spread over his body, his arms and legs going weak, telling him he'd fallen for Bairong's ploy. Shenlong, oh Shenlong, said Bairong. You almost ruined things for me, but I'll show you mercy. The drug isn't poisonous. It'll just incapacitate your arms and legs for about half a day. You must remember this favor I showed you. But for now, could you please stop getting in my way? She still sounded mellow and sweet, like she was playing coy with her lover. All the while, she struck at Shen Qiao with her palm. After all, the drug might not be completely effective, so it was better to beat him until he couldn't fight back. That way, she could take care of young Wushi in peace. Her blows struck him and Shen Qiao slammed into a rough, jagged wall of stone. Pain tore through him and he felt something warm and wet start to seep through his robes. "Shenlong, don't hold my ruthlessness against me," Bairong said gently. "You insisted on protecting him, so I had to get rid of you first. Don't worry, though. I've changed my mind. A dead young Wushi won't do me any good, but a brainless idiot as Huan Yu's sect leader? That would serve Huan Yewan's sect's interests far better, so I'll spare his life." She raised her lovely fair palm as she spoke, then swung it down at the crown of Yang Wushi's head. Bairong was certain she'd use the perfect amount of force. With this hit, she would damage Yang Wushi's skull in the slightest, but rather only his brain. She wouldn't damage his skull in the slightest, but rather only his brain. But before her palm met its target, she was forced to dodge to the side. The bamboo cane darted after her like a shadow. "Didn't you inhale the drug?" Bairong was incredulous. "I did a little," said Shen Qiao, "but I held my breath in time." Shen Qiao coughed, his movements slightly slowing. Spotting her chance, Bairong attacked, using her 16 steps from heaven to abyss to appear before Shen Qiao like a phantom. She jabbed her index and middle fingers towards Shen Qiao's heart, slipping right through his defenses. She wanted to force him to retreat, but Shen Qiao didn't withdraw. He even moved forward, forcing Bairong to stay her hand. "Do you like him that much? Enough to give your life to protect him?" Bairong yelled, utterly exasperated. Shen Qiao remained silent. It wasn't clear whether he was unwilling to explain or thought that speaking would be too much effort. Right at that moment, Yang Wushi's tightly closed eyes sprang open. Shen Qiao's back was to him, so he didn't see it happen, but Bairong did. Her heart leapt in shock at the sight of Yang Wushi staring straight at her. Unable to determine what sort of state he was in, she said, "Shenlong, your lover's awake. Do you still have the time to fight me?" Sure that she was lying, Shen Qiao naturally ignored her. It wasn't until a cool breeze from behind reached him that he became self-aware, and he was forced to turn to block. Bairong took this chance to move, alighting softly near the cave's entrance. "You thought I was lying. Well, you two have fun catching up. I won't interfere." With another giggle, she vanished from the mouth of the cavern. She could handle someone like Shen Qiao, but with someone like Yang Wushi in the mix, especially one who could fight, the only outcome was death. So once she was certain Yang Wushi was awake, she made the immediate decision to cut and run. A brutal swipe from the front sent the bamboo cane flying. Shen Qiao didn't even have time to speak before his throat was grabbed in a vicious chokehold. "Shen Qiao." The voice was bone-chilling. Not a trace of emotion was in it. The grip around his throat was so crushing his neck was about to snap in two. Shen Qiao was about to suffocate, but in his alarm he sent out a palm strike, yet Yang Wushi didn't evade. He took the blow straight on. His grip slackened and he backed up several steps, but he didn't hack up any blood. Meanwhile, Shen Qiao bowed over at the waist, coughing so hard tears streamed down his face. The remaining strength drained from his body, he slumped to the ground. After a long time, Yang Wushi spoke again. "Why are you here?" His voice sounded so much closer to his normal tone, but Shen Qiao remained wary. He leaned against a stone wall, gasping, "You had a chi deviation." Yang Wushi looked at Liu, who lay still inside the cave, and then shifted his gaze back to Shen Qiao. Suddenly he smiled. "I'm not wrong, am I?" he said. "Such a good opportunity was presented to you, and you didn't seize it to kill me? Or even hide on the sidelines and watch me get killed? You actually intervened." "Why would I kill you?" asked Shen Qiao. Yang Wushi burst out laughing. "Ah, Qiao, did you spend so much time with me that you actually fell in love?" Shen Qiao went on panting and then slowly said 3 words. "Repaying my debt." "Repaying your debt?" Surprise colored Yang Wushi's smile. "I remember telling you early on that I only spared your life on a whim. I wanted to see if you were qualified to be my opponent, and I wanted to enjoy seeing whether a poor soul like you would break down, someone who had nothing, who'd been betrayed and abandoned by your dearest kin. I wanted to see if you'd be unable to endure the shock and lose your mind. No matter motives, it doesn't change that you saved me. Even if you'd saved me only to kill me later, then I should still be grateful before I'm killed." Yang Wushi burst out laughing even louder. "Ah, Qiao, I don't think you should be a Taoist. If only you practiced Buddhism instead. With your soft heart, you might have already cultivated yourself into the highest of holy monks. Then you wouldn't have been tossed off a cliff and ended up in such a tragic state. Shen Qiao ignored his sarcasm. He drew a breath and then continued. With Yuan Yang in power now, Zhou could almost be called peaceful. If you weren't here, and only beyond Yanmei and Yu Xinyan led Huan Yu sect, they might be able to fend off the ambitions of the various powers surrounding you. And if misfortune were to strike down Yuan Yang, the ministers and officials might be able to carry on serving a new emperor. But if other countries seize that opportunity to declare war, then in the end, only the ordinary citizens will suffer. Yang Wushi smiled. Well, your tongue has certainly grown sharper. In the middle of their conversation, Li Yu woke up. At first, he looked stunned and bewildered, but when he saw Yang Wushi eyeing him with interest, his shock immediately transformed into panic. He half stumbled, half crawled to his feet, and then dashed out of the entrance without another word. Yang Wushi carelessly flicked a pebble from his hand. The stone shard grazed past Li Yu's ear, leaving a fine trickle of blood. Li Yu shrieked and ran even faster. If Yang Wushi had wanted to kill him, he would have been a cold corpse by now. Shen Qiao didn't know why Yang Wushi had changed his mind, and he didn't have the strength left to guess. He leaned against the wall, but the dried gash on his back ached more and more. If it wasn't for the true qi circulating through his body, he would have been frozen solid. Yang Wushi turned to him and said, I won't kill him, because there are a myriad of ways to give someone a fate worse than death. He failed to kill me, so from now on he's bound to live in eternal fear of my retribution. His life will never grow easier. All I need to do is send people under my name to harass him from time to time, and he'll scare himself half to death for me. Don't you think that's much more entertaining? But another thought occurred to Shen Qiao. Even if I hadn't intervened, Li Yu and Bairong couldn't have killed you, right? That's right, said Yang Wushi. I couldn't move, but I could still sense the outside world. I heard your conversations. You discovered the freezing qi inside of me. If they'd tried to kill me, they'd have been struck with the backlash from the cold qi too. Shen Qiao sighed softly. Bairong left, he said suddenly. Until just then, Bairong had been lurking outside the cave, trying to confirm whether or not Yang Wushi had really recovered. It wasn't until Li Yu fled and she heard Yang Wushi and Shen Qiao's conversation that she finally gave up and left too. Yang Wushi laughed. Why do you sigh, Ah Chao? You climbed all this way up the mountain, ignored all dangers to protect me. How could I not do you a favor? You don't like seeing me kill people, so I let them go this time. Not an issue. And it'd be such a pity if that little girl Bairong died now. With her around, Heihuan sect has quite a lot of fun to look forward to. He rose and then bent down to lift Shen Qiao. But the moment his hand touched the other man's back, Shen Qiao shuddered. Probably because his robe rubbed against his wound. Yang Wushi noticed and pulled Shen Qiao onto his back instead. He had just left Qi Deviation and had been in a perilous situation, but now he seemed perfectly fine, treading down the cliff from the cave as if it were flat ground. With a moment's effort, they were already at the foot of the mountain. I feel like, didn't Shen Qiao help Yang Wushi? No, maybe that's something different. We're gonna wait for that. After they returned to the guest complex, Shen Qiao applied medicine, regulated his breathing for recuperation, and then entered straight into a 3-day seclusion. When he emerged 3 days later, the envoys of Zhou had already completed their mission and were preparing to return home. On hearing that he'd been wounded, Yu and Qing sent many people to the guest complex with tonics. He harbored secret curiosity about the conclusion of Yang Wushi and Ruyan Kehui's battle. He'd heard it came to a draw, but he didn't know any details. As he didn't have the courage to ask Yang Wushi in person, he wanted to find Shen Qiao. Unfortunately, Shen Qiao had entered seclusion and was unable to meet him. So Yu and Qing waited for 3 days, anxious out of his mind, until Shen Qiao finally came out. He then set off in haste to find Shen Qiao. First he asked after his health, and then he said awkwardly, I don't think it would be so crowded that day. I almost got separated from Wushi. I hope you weren't seriously injured. Many thanks to you and Zhang for your concern, said Shen Qiao. It was only a few minor injuries. Most of them have already healed. I'm going to have to go back and check that donghua episode. I thought that Shen Qiao, took... I'm thinking of something different. We'll see. I'll be honest with you, said Yu and Qing. We were about to head back to Zhou, and if all goes as expected, some from Lichuan Academy will be there to send us off. But who exactly won when Junior Preceptor Yan and Academy Master Ruyan dueled? You watched the fight from the sidelines, so you must know everything. The Junior Preceptor said nothing, and I'm too afraid to press him for answers, but if he won, then I can taunt the people from Lichuan Academy a little and show off the prestige of our great Zhou. Shen Qiao hadn't expected Yuan Qing to rush over and see him for something so trivial. He thought it somewhat comical. Sect leader Yan won by a narrow margin, I believe. Ah! Yuan Qing's brows curved in pleasure, but there was also some disbelief. Truly? I've heard that Ruyan Kehui is a very powerful martial artist, enough to rank among the top 3 in the world. Perhaps he might even qualify for number 1. Yuan Qing wouldn't be able to understand martial arts even with a thorough explanation, so Shen Qiao picked the simplest answer. In truth, both of them were injured. For Sect Leader Yan, it triggered some old injuries, but in the case of Academy Master Ruyan, if my guess is correct, his meridians were damaged. He likely won't be able to use his true chi freely for a month. Why only a month? I'd say he won't be able to fight anyone for 3 months. Oh, a cool voice came from the door and Yan Wushi walked in. If you had something to ask, why didn't you come ask me personally? For some reason, the sight of Yan Wushi always rattled Yuan Qing. The moment Yan Wushi's terrifying gaze fell on him, it was as if needles sprouted on this chair, leaving him squirming uncontrollably. The junior preceptor has thousands of things to attend to every day, he immediately replied with a nervous laugh. So I dare not disturb you. I didn't want to disturb you at all. I'm just going to go supervise him and make sure that packing gets done already. Once we're ready to set out, I'll send someone over to tell you. The moment he finished speaking, he sped right out the door. Yan Wushi turned to Shen Qiao. How was it? Shen Qiao knew what he was asking. Your battle with Ruyan Kehui was brilliant. It was exceptional. Perhaps others gleaned some new insights, but during my 3 days of seclusion, I made no progress beyond healing a few old wounds. It feels as if there's some sort of barrier preventing me from advancing any further. I'm left spinning in place. The only good things are that my circulation of true chi has smoothed out a bit, and my eyes have improved somewhat. I can roughly make out light and shadow now. What a pity, said a voice deep inside Yan Wushi's heart. Cold and unfeeling, callous and heartless. But none of that showed on his face. Ooh. Instead, he gave Shen Qiao a small smile. That's good. Soon, word of the duel between Yan Wushi and Ruyan Kehui spread like wildfire. Interesting that we got some internal monologue with old Yan Wushi. We don't get that a lot in this book. Is he saying what a pity? Is he saying what a pity because his meridian, he's spinning in place? Is he saying what a pity because he's not improving? Is he saying what a pity because he can't see Yan Wushi? What are we going to do with that? What everyone cared about most was who had won. In southern Qin, Ruyan Kehui wasn't only famous in the Zhonghu, he was also a significant figure in the imperial court. The Lord of Qin treated him with utmost respect, and Empress Liu was also from Linchuan Academy. Hence, in the eyes of many Southerners, Linchuan Academy status was so special and noteworthy, he may as well have been the head of Confucianism and martial arts in the Southern dynasty. With that kind of status and reputation, even the idea of Ruyan losing to Yan Wushi was practically unimaginable. However, everyone who'd watched the fight that day said it was a draw, and that was fact. And ever since Ruyan Kehui had returned, he'd shut himself inside Linchuan Academy and never left. No matter who came around to visit, they couldn't get a meeting with him. Yan Wushi was the same. He stayed in the guest complex and never went elsewhere. This only spurred on the rumor mill further. Some said both had been grievously wounded. Some said that Ruyan Kehui had won by a slight margin, and now Yan Wushi was too ashamed to show his face. At the same time, Yuan Qing sent a message saying that he wished to invite Academy Master Ruyan to a banquet that Sect Leader Yan was throwing at the guest complex. He said that he hoped the Academy Master could take the time to honor them with his attendance. This was purely his own concoction, a method of embarrassing the Southerners that he'd come up with after hearing Shen Qiao's report on the duel. If the Linchuan Academy Master didn't make an appearance, he could mock them relentlessly. And if Ruyan Kehui did attend, that worked too. After all, he'd never said that Yan Wushi would show up at the banquet. Though the two countries had formed an alliance, everyone knew it was only temporary. They all shared the same goal right now, but the moment that goal disappeared, the allies would return to being enemies. Keeping up the pretense on the surface worked well enough. Underneath it all, the fighting had never ceased. Quite a few Southerners were upset about the invitation. They all thought that Yuan Qing was going too far. One after another, a good number who thought highly of their own martial prowess came to the guest complex, asking to challenge Yan Wushi. But Yan Wushi was the kind of man who reserved even to his egotism and conceit for those on his level. The mediocre remainder weren't worth his attention, so he couldn't care less what they said or thought. And if he really were to personally greet them, they wouldn't so much as greet the sun the next day. In fact, Jiang Wushi didn't need to do anything at all. The men who came with Yuanqing were enough to deal with the martial artists who occasionally came knocking. 2 days later, news finally arrived from Linchuan Academy. They graciously declined Yuanqing's invitation, saying the academy master was in seclusion and unable to meet with anyone. This reply seemed to confirm Yuanqing's insinuations, and those voices chastising the Zhou envoys for being too arrogant vanished overnight. Of course, Yuanqing was completely gleeful, and he happily went to inform Shen Qiao, only to hear the news from Ruru that Shen Qiao had already left. As Ruru was completely in the dark, Yuanqing was forced to look for Yang Wushi, even though he was terrified of speaking to him. Junior Preceptor, he said, does your esteemed self know where Taoist Master Shen has gone? What, do you yearn for him that much? asked Yang Wushi in return. Yuanqing tentatively gave an apologetic smile. Nothing of the sort. Taoist Master Shen traveled here with us, so he should be returning with us as well, but now he's disappeared, so I ought to ask about it. He left, said Yang Wushi. Huh? Originally, Yang Wushi had no interest in telling him too much, but Yuanqing's disappointed and bewildered expression amused him. He told me a while ago he would leave on his own after he'd seen my venerable self's duel with Ruyang Kehui. But where can he go by himself? Yuanqing muttered. Didn't he say he couldn't return to Zhandu Mountain? Yang Wushi laughed. Yuanqing, you brought your beloved concubine along for the trip, and now you're wavering? You're so worried about Shen Qiao. Is this venerable one nothing to you? Though he was smiling as he spoke, a shudder ran through Yuanqing. Losing the nerve to ask any further questions, he excused himself and beat a hasty retreat. Watching the pathetic figure Yuanqing cut as he ran away, Yang Wushi languidly put down the book in his hand and looked out the window. A smile still hung on the corner of his lips, but in his eyes was a bone-chilling amusement. I don't know what to think about that. Just then, Shen Qiao was on a road, walking north. There was precisely the right amount of sun. Dressed in blue, carrying his bamboo staff, the ends of his robes fluttering, he couldn't hold back a smile that curled the corner of his lips. Squinting with a hand against his forehead to block out the sunlight, he could see the scene before him. Though he couldn't see as clearly as before his injuries, what vision he did have now he appreciated more than ever. Before leaving, he'd gone to find Yuanqing and say his farewells, but the other man hadn't been there. So he penned a letter to Yuanqing and asked Ruru to pass it to him on his behalf. But Ruru was very much afraid of her master, so it was possible she'd given the letter to Yang Wushi first. Still, there wasn't much in the letter beyond the standard courtesies. Shen Qiao had thought Yang Wushi would refuse to let him go, but things had gone surprisingly smoothly. Yang Wushi said little and agreed straight away, leaving Shen Qiao somewhat taken aback. This Huan Yu sect leader's character was just as the rumors painted him, mercurial and unpredictable. Even after they spent so much time together, Shen Qiao still dared not to say that he completely understood him. Perhaps it was because he'd refused to accept the demonic core, coupled with how hopeless the project of recovering his martial arts seemed. Yang Wushi no longer considered him a worthy rival, and in his disappointment, he'd been delighted to let him go. Or perhaps it was because he arduously climbed mountains to fend off Liu and Bai Rong's attacks, and that act had finally moved Yang Wushi. Wouldn't that prove that no matter how callous and unfeeling a person was, a trace of humanity still lay deep within their hearts? Oh, okay, all right. Shen Qiao shook his head and laughed helplessly at his own conjectures. Perhaps he did think too well of others, but if made him happier, what was wrong with believing in the best of people? Oh my gosh, so you're saying you've got Yang Wushi on the one hand, who believes that there's evil in everyone, and everyone is at their core a bad person. And then you have Shen Qiao, who believes the opposite, that even at the core of their being, there's a shred of humanity and good. Come on now. Oh, you're just setting that up. His journey out of the Zhangkong progressed smoothly. The region south of the Yangtze had always been prosperous since ancient times. It was bordered by land and water and was politically stable as well. There it was easy to forget that the world was still in turmoil. However, as he crossed over the border of Qin and entered Qi, still heading north, the number of travelers and merchants dropped noticeably, and the expressions on their faces held less contentment, less joy. Instead, there was a nervousness and fatigue about them. Shen Qiao found that he greatly enjoyed observing the emotions on all their faces, perhaps because he'd spent so long judging a person's state by their voice. Even if he still couldn't see clearly, there were still quite a few discoveries to be made. April became May as he traveled, walking and resting at intervals. His pace wasn't slow, for when the mood came, he'd also apply some qigong. Almost no one knew that this traveling scholar, wandering along carefree and relaxed, supported by a cane, was actually the downtrodden former sect leader of Zhandu Mountain who had been beholden to the demon lord. By now the news of Yang Wushi and Ryuan Kehui's battle had spread throughout the populace. It seemed there was a grand martial arts conference happening in the Liang province, for Shen Qiao saw many people from the Zhonghu rushing that way and heard them all talking about the duel. Naturally, the people of Qi didn't revere Ryuan Kehui the way the southerners did. Instead, their words were full of praise for Yang Wushi. It was human nature to admire those of great strength, and Yang Wushi's strength won him many admirers, even some who weren't from the demonic discipline. Shen Qiao was in a tea house outside Liang's province capital at the moment, listening to the other patrons discuss how brilliant the fight between Yang Wushi and Ryuan Kehui had been. They hadn't witnessed it personally, but their accounts were so exaggerated and flowery, one would think they'd seen it themselves. Shen Qiao couldn't help but smile. There was an empty seat beside him, and soon someone sat down in it. Shen Qiao had his head lowered as he sipped his tea, and before he could look up, he heard the newcomer say, "What a coincidence." Shen Qiao found himself at a loss for words. Chapter 43, Shen Qiao weeps. Shen Qiao rested his forehead in his palm. This humble Shen thinks that you can no longer call this a coincidence. Yang Wushi languidly turned over the cup on the table and filled it halfway with water. He didn't drink, he just left it there. It's such a small world. We part at the ends of the sky, only to meet at the edges of the sea. This venerable one thinks we're quite linked by fate. Why has sect leader Yan come here? Well, why have you come here? Asked Yang Wushi. I'm heading to the capital of Qi, Yechang. Oh, truly a coincidence. I'm headed to Yechang as well. Shen Qiao was caught between laughing and crying. He is Shilian's brother. I'm going to look for someone. Surely you're not looking for someone there as well. What a strange thing to say, said Yang Wushi. Why am I not allowed to look for someone? Shen Qiao ignored him and silently finished his tea and snacks. After paying his bill, he picked up his cane, ready to continue on his way. Yang Wushi stood as well. With his hands clasped behind him, he followed after Shen Qiao, not fast, but not slow. He maintained distance about 7 to 8 paces between them. Never closer, never farther. Shen Qiao took the bizarre situation in stride. He entered Liang province, found an inn, and sat down in his feather-light traveling bags. Then he ordered some food and went to sit on the second floor where he slowly ate. It was a little past noon. Most of the guests had already finished their meals and left, so while the second floor was otherwise empty, the floor below was quite lively. The noon market had just opened, and a number of people rushed towards the area carrying their wares. Shen Qiao ordered a jug of plum juice. He'd only taken about half a sip when Yang Wushi emerged, climbing the stairs in the corner. He's like, what? He smiled at Shen Qiao. Your expression doesn't have the joy of someone who's seen their old comrade from a distant land. Shen Qiao said helplessly, I'd be happier if sect leader Yan hadn't just come to see me. Indeed, I didn't come just to see you, said Yang Wushi. He sat down next to him and Shen Qiao called the waiter over. Soon a second jug of plum juice arrived, together with a bowl and chopsticks. Yang Wushi laughed. Why is Ah Qiao in such a hurry to draw a line between us? Shen Qiao didn't take him seriously. I recall that you value cleanliness. You would never share a jug with someone else. Are we setting up for an indirect kiss? Are we setting up for that? Yang Wushi didn't reply. Why did sect leader Yang come here if not to find me? Asked Shen Qiao. Yuan Yang has already drawn up a large-scale plan to conquer Qi. All of Qi is in terror over the news. Even Heihuan sect has begun to splinter from within. He didn't use the fresh jug the waiter had brought. Instead, he picked up Shen Qiao's jug, and poured some into his bowl, and then brought it to his mouth and took a sip. I mean, it's close enough. It's close enough to an indirect kiss. Yan Zhuzhu wants to collaborate with Huan Yu's sect, but Song Zhijing refuses. The two of them fell out, and now Yan Zhuzhu has sent me a message saying that Song Zhijing is currently in Yecheng. She'd like me to help her kill him. Although Song Zhijing had only been the disciple of Ryu's sect's final leader, Shui Yuwang, he hadn't pursued the reunification of the demonic sects when Ryu's sect splintered. Instead, he pursued an ardent relationship with Yan Zhuzhu. In this way, he became an extraordinarily high-ranked elder in Heihuan sect. But if anyone were to look down on him for this choice, thinking it meant he was incompetent, they'd be gravely mistaken. The man reveled in murder, was a fanatic when it came to beauties and sex, and had countless enemies, but he also possessed overwhelming martial prowess that was in a class of its own. His ranking among the world's top 10 was especially difficult to locate. Some claimed he ranked in the top 3, while others disagreed. Word had it that he'd absorbed the entirety of Shui Yuwang's martial arts before his master's death. So that can happen. Some went even further, claiming that Song Zhijing was a monster who betrayed all decency, killing his own master to steal his martial arts. Though no one had witnessed the crime, Song Zhijing's reputation was such that many people were happy to add it to the tally of his misdeeds. Shen Qiao sighed. Song Zhijing must have worked hard to help Yan Zhuzhu establish Heihwan sect. Even if they've fallen out and become enemies now, surely there's no need for it to go as far as killing each other. Yang Wushi sneered. Even Zhandu Mountain has martial siblings turning against each other. When it happens in demonic sects where the strong prey on the weak reign supreme, such incidents will only be more overt. Now, Song Zhijing has created his own faction inside Heihwan sect, and the disciples in it only pay lip service to Yan Zhuzhu while silently undermining her authority. Just because she doesn't express her hatred doesn't mean she feels none. Otherwise, why is she yet to seek revenge on you for killing Huo Zhijing right in front of her? He was Song Zhijing's disciple. It's highly likely that Yan Zhuzhu wants to have you kill Song Zhijing for her. Even if that's the case, wouldn't it be good news for my venerable self if Song Zhijing were to die? A Heihwan sect without him, with only Yan Zhuzhu, could never contend with Huan Yu sect. And once Zhou annexes Qi, their ability to stir up trouble will be greatly limited as well. Shen Qiao shook his head and raised his bowl. Then I can only hope that sect leader Yan achieves his goals. Many thanks. Their bowls clinked, and the resulting sound crisp and pleasant. Shen Qiao thought back to when they'd first met. He'd never have imagined that there'd come a time where he and Yang Wushi could chat peacefully like this. And he smiled despite himself. Oh, look at this. Been like, these sect leaders are going to kill each other. And Shen Qiao's like, have fun with that. I'm going to have to go back through the donghua when this is over and to compare notes before we start the discussion. That's a good shot of them, though. Damn, Yang Wushi's got some broad-ass shoulders, right? Man is like built like a Mack truck. Yang Wushi saw the smile on Shen Qiao's lips, but averted his eyes and picked up a piece of asparagus with his chopsticks. Did you find the person you were looking for? Not yet, said Shen Qiao. I've heard that they're on the road, but I haven't been able to catch up to them. You're looking for UI's group, aren't you? Shen Qiao didn't hide it. Yes. Now that I've recovered some of my martial arts, enough to defend myself, I have no need to fear what UI's planning. Even if we can't come to an agreement, I'll still be able to walk away. I've heard that he brought 2 elders and Gushime with him on his travels, and they're heading to Eastern Kaghanate. I wish to speak with Gushime first. Since UI has left Zhandu Mountain, they're without a leader right now, said Yang Wushi. Why not return there first and take back the sect leader's seat? Do that and he'll be powerless when he returns. Shen Qiao shook his head. UI is very careful. He left no vulnerabilities, not even with the poisoning incident. If he was confident enough to leave Zhandu Mountain for the Kaghanate, he must have planned out everything ahead of time and would have no qualms about my possible return. After all, he couldn't have done everything himself. Putting aside the majority who have been kept in the dark about his plans, there must have been people within Zhandu Mountain secretly supporting him from the very beginning. If I return now, I'll likely be walking into a trap. On the contrary, the people he has with him now might be the ones who intend to subvert him. Gushime grew up under my watch. I still have some confidence in her. Yang Wushi listened seriously, and then he nodded and said with a smile, Then this venerable one hopes that your wishes come true as well. Most days, when his tone was soft and gentle, it would hold a hint of mockery. It was rare to see him speak so plainly and normally and placidly, so Shen Qiao smiled too. Many thanks. Look at them! Look at them having this conversation! There was quite some distance to Yeqing from Liang Province. The two of them stayed from one more day in Liang Province and then set off northward. Once they were out of Liang Province, the closer they got to Yeqing, the more refugees they saw. Okay, I think I know what we're getting at. Shen Qiao had already been to Yeqing, but the scene before him now was even bleaker than the last time. He had to halt and look ahead, watching the vagrants as they slowly trudged along the dry riverbed in the direction of the capital, their motions listless and eyes dull. He could remember encountering this kind of scene countless times before. It seemed like a world completely apart from the Zhonghu. In truth, most families could carve out space for themselves in the Zhonghu that were families from money that had some to spare. Some of them were even wealthy landlords or families that ran large enterprises, such as the Liyue Guild, who did business both land and sea, and whose dealings spanned all nations. They were a true example of a powerful organization. And of course, Huan Yu's sect was even more impressive. They held deep ties to the Zhou imperial court, and they had so many estates not only in the capital but all over Zhou. Even Zhongdu's Violet Palace, who insisted on withdrawing from mundane affairs, had in truth purchased all of Zhongdu Mountain during its first generation, after its founder had established the sect. The fields at the foot of the mountain cultivated by the residents of Zhongdu Town were all rented from Zhongdu Mountain. The successive generations of sect leaders had all kind hearts and set fair rental fees, but the combined income taken together with what Zhongdu Mountain produced itself was plenty enough to support Zhongdu Mountain's disciples. Only people who lived comfortable and worry-free lives could concentrate on practicing martial arts and pursuing such aspirations. How could someone who couldn't even feed themselves, who had to worry about their next meal, be in the frame of mind to train? That's a really good point about sustainability and about, like, generational wealth, and about how, like, it's easier for people to kind of get ahead if they have that leg up. If you're constantly struggling to survive, how can you hope to even get ahead? As for the refugees before him now, from the time they were born, their children were forced to face both natural and man-made calamities, and were left hungry every day. Crueler still, the children might even be used as reserve rations by their parents. Even if one or two of them had outstanding potential to be martial geniuses, it was very likely that they'd perish before discerning eyes discovered their talents. Ah Chao's soft heart is acting up again. Surprisingly, young Wushi didn't mock him this time. There was a smile in his tone, but also a sigh. Shen Qiao shook his head. In truth, I was also an orphan. I don't know who my parents are, but I was left abandoned in the desolate wilderness. It's said I was very weak after birth, and I almost died in my swaddling clothes. Perhaps that's why my parents abandoned me, or maybe they were too poor to raise me. In any case, I was fortunate enough to meet Shizun, who saved my life. So every time I see these people, I always regret how little I can do for them. If I'd realized this earlier while I was on Zhongdu Mountain, I could have directed the sect to re-enter the secular world. Then maybe I could have taken in some poor children as disciples and saved a few more lives. Quit being amazing, Shen Qiao. Oh my gosh. Also, who would abandon little Shen Qiao? Oh my gosh. No, he's too precious for that. Life is never fair, said Yan Wushi. Some are the prides of heaven from birth, surrounded by riches and luxuries, while others are born without even kin to rely on and have to struggle in poverty. People like you, who can judge every person by themselves, are the rarest of rare. Most are like Qinggong, filled with bottomless greed, constantly overestimating themselves and believing they can always get more. If Zhongdu Mountain took in a couple more disciples, it's highly possible you'd end up with a couple more ingrates like UI. Shen Qiao smiled helplessly, but it's also possible we could end up with a couple more people of great promise. The kind who can aid those in crisis, who could rectify the course of the world. Yan Wushi disagreed. If you want something, you must fight for it yourself, instead of dreaming that someone will come and help you. A person's life and death are a result of their own choices, and have nothing to do with others. Shen Qiao spoke no more. Ooh, that's an interesting concept. So you have these two trains of thoughts where Shen Qiao is like, if we help others, that kindness will be repaid in the future. And Yuan Wushi's like, no, if you want something, you've got to fight for it yourself. So if you save these people, you can't expect them to be like you. But then Shen Qiao's like, but I turned out this way. And Yuan Wushi's like, you're one in a million. Not far in the distance, a couple walked toward them, dragging a small boy who was little more than a bag of bones. As they walked, they quarreled. Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi's excellent ears naturally heard part of their argument. They'd exchanged their own child for this one, and were currently looking for a place to cook him. Somewhere with nobody else around. This was to prevent anyone from seeing and trying to steal him from them. But they themselves had already begun fighting over how to divide the portions. Oh my God. The husband thought that only the legs and the back of the child still had meat, and he wanted it for himself. But the wife argued that she had delivered the child they traded away for after 10 months of suffering, so she should get the choice on the food they'd received. They looked like they lacked the strength to walk, yet they suddenly started to scuffle. The child they traded for simply watched from the side blankly, letting them fight over the right to eat him first. His expression was numb, as if his consciousness had left him long ago. That's crazy! I didn't realize it was like that! That's horrifying! Oh my god! Ah! Shen Qiao couldn't take it anymore. He went up and seized the boy. Seeing that their meal had been stolen, the couple immediately stopped scuffling with each other and lunged at Shen Qiao. They hadn't eaten for many days. A moderately strong woman could have knocked them down easily, let alone Shen Qiao. But even after Shen Qiao brought the boy back with him, the child's expression didn't change in the slightest. Forget gratitude, he didn't even show the slightest joy at escaping with his life. "What's your name?" asked Shen Qiao. "Would you like to eat something first?" Shen Qiao reached out to pull him closer. Before he could touch him, the boy simply tipped forward and fell to the ground motionless. Shen Qiao was alarmed. He went for a closer look and realized the boy had been gravely ill for some time. The disease had long spread to his organs. He'd already been at death's door when the couple had been dragging him along. Even the gods couldn't have saved him. At that moment, unable to hold out any longer, his heart finally gave out. Whether Shen Qiao tried to save him or not made no difference to him at all. His eyes remained half open, as if within him lingered a final trace of reluctance and a denouncement of the world. Judging from the scars on his body and the ribs straining beneath his skin, this boy probably had never lived a single good day in his life. He probably never understood why he had been born to suffer such misery. Shen Qiao was still for a long time, watching him without blinking. Suddenly he reached out and passed his hand over the boy's face, closing those half-opened eyes. Another hand came and covered Shen Qiao's eyes, gently swabbing the wet tracks from their corners. "You didn't even cry when I betrayed you, but now you're crying over someone you didn't even know?" Everything I encountered before, whether they were setbacks or hardships, were things I could endure. But this little boy, he probably never hurt anyone. Heaven ordained his birth, and it shouldn't have been to suffer. Everyone has a right to live. No matter how difficult his life was, it should have at least shown him some hope of a way out. Young Wushi would have thought such words hypocritical from anyone else's mouth. Even now, he could never do the things Shen Qiao did. But somehow he unconsciously and naturally, the disdain that welled up inside of him in the beginning had changed. Now when Shen Qiao did these things, he was no longer surprised, nor did he find it strange. Oh, so did Yang Wushi wipe the tears from his eyes? Or was it Shen Qiao's own hand? Either way, "You're too naive," he said. "Who's responsible for giving him the kind of hope? Other people also need to live, and they also need to worry about themselves. Why should they be kind to them?" Shen Qiao stood up. "I was willing to be kind to him, but I was a moment too late." "You can only save 1 or 2 people by yourself at the most," Yang Wushi said indifferently. "So many people in the world are in the same state as him, and yet you're indifferent to them. Isn't that hypocritical? If one day when the turmoil ends and the land is unified and this kind of thing still happens, then at least it will happen far less. And then more than just 1 or 2 will be saved. It will be thousands and thousands. Isn't that right?" Yang Wushi didn't care enough to reply, but walked to the side of the road instead. Using his palm as a blade, he used his internal energy to slice open a deep ditch beneath a tree. It was a perfect rectangle and of uniform depth. Seeing what he'd done, Shen Qiao understood the meaning and smiled despite himself. "Many thanks." This scene, y'all! He placed the little boy's corpse in the ditch, laying him flat, and then swept the dirt inside, filling it until it was level and smooth. In these troubled times, it was fortunate if a corpse wasn't left exposed in the wilderness. If he erected a tomb marker, people might think there were funerary objects buried beneath, and it would draw the attention of robbers. With everything settled, Shen Qiao and Yang Wushi entered the city. Inside the city and outside were practically 2 different worlds. It was said that when Gao Wei, the Emperor of Qi, heard about the years of famine and the widespread refugees, he didn't order his subordinates to provide disaster relief. Instead, he built a pauper's village at Hualin Garden inside the capital. There he dressed up as a beggar and told the eunuchs and maidservants to play traveling merchants and passerby so that he could experience the fun of begging for himself. Hence, when people in Yachong talked about Hualien Garden, their faces showed no admiration for the royal garden, but rather a subtle, tacit mockery. That in itself tells us all we need to know about this man. However, even as danger loomed from the northern Zhou army pressing even closer to the border, the city still looked like its peaceful, carefree self, not much difference from the last few times Shen Qiao had visited. It was still the same luxurious, perfumed carriages, the same extravagant atmosphere, the long and fluttering sleeves, the brocade sashes, the silk skirts, the jade hairpins and the magnificent robes, the subtle fragrances as they wafted. It was an explosion of splendor as far as the eye could see. This was the face of Yachong, the capital of Qi, a world full of glory and wealth. Meanwhile, the beggars outside are eating children. Damn. At first glance, newly arrived travelers wouldn't find a single poor person. They might even grow ashamed at their own lack of wealth, thinking themselves too shabby in comparison. However, if one took a quick glance in many alleys and nooks, they could sometimes spot a few plainly dressed, ordinary civilians, starkly incongruent with the flood of luxury surrounding them. Finding a couple people in such a large city was not something that could be accomplished in 1 or 2 days. UI and his group might have taken up lodgings at a Taoist monastery, or perhaps they changed into ordinary robes to hide their identities. If the latter were true, it'd be like hunting for a needle at the bottom of the sea, compounding the difficulty. The two of them had just parted after entering the city. Yang Wushi didn't say where he was going, and Shen Qiao didn't ask. He only said, "Take care, sect leader Yan. I hope everything goes well." "Looking for an inn to stay at?" asked Yang Wushi. Shen Qiao thought for a moment. "I'll try searching the Taoist monasteries first. If I still can't find them, I'll just stay in one of the monasteries." Yang Wushi nodded. This venerable one still has business to attend to. He didn't elaborate, he just turned to leave. In the span of a blink, he'd completely vanished from Shen Qiao's sight. Shen Qiao stood in place for a while, watching as Yang Wushi disappeared into the crowd. He smiled despite himself, and then also took his leave. This is like the warmest they've been around each other this entire story. They're still not at like, let's stay at an inn together sort of thing, but this is surprisingly heartwarming how like congenial they are around each other. He hadn't walked far when a large troop of men on horseback marched towards him. Soldiers led the way as they drove the pedestrians aside, and everyone scattered off the road. No one wanted to bump into the noble behind those soldiers, lest they bring trouble onto themselves. Shen Qiao had dodged to the side too when he heard someone behind him say curiously, "Which prince or princess is it this time?" Another person laughed as he replied, "You're wrong. Look at the insignia. That's the Prince of Chenyang Commandery." "Ah," understanding dawned on the first man. "The Prince of Chenyang Commandery, who's greatly favored by the Emperor?" "Correct," said the second in a meaningful tone. "That's him." The Prince of Chenyang Commandery, Mu Tipu, was greatly renowned. Almost everyone had heard of him. However, his fame came from the Emperor, not from his own achievements or abilities. There was also some deeply unpleasant history between Shen Qiao and the Prince of Chenyang Commandery. Because of him, Mu Tipu would never be able to have relations ever again. His loathing for Shen Qiao was probably long-standing and bone deep. Shen Qiao wasn't afraid of him, but he was here to find someone, not cause more trouble. After hearing who it was, he backed deeper into the crowd, preparing to hide himself in a nearby shop for the time being. But then he heard someone's surprised tone. "That's not the Prince of Chenyang Commandery." Shen Qiao looked back. In an unfortunate coincidence, the person riding high astride the horse was just then looking in his direction. Their gazes met. Shen Qiao calmly turned his head away, unruffled, but the other party started slightly. "Oh, no, it's not the Prince of Chenyang Commandery. He's the new favorite of the Emperor. I heard that he was recommended by the Prince of Chenyang Commandery. His Majesty is very fond of him right now. Even Consort Fong has to take a backseat to him." "Consort Fong? She's the one who..." Right? Right! The Emperor stripped her naked and then let the officers pay a look at her. 1,000 gold per view, that Consort Fong. The surrounding crowd followed up with a stint of knowing laughter. With an emperor and officials like that, what hope was there for the country? Shen Qiao thought of Yuan Yang, who he'd met, and then shook his head. He quickly dove back into the crowd and left. Wow. So Shen Qiao realizing how different Yu and Yang is to Gao and the people that he serve under him. Interesting. I thought for a second it was going to be Qinggong, but it was not. Shen Qiao, Northern Qi esteemed Buddhism. Therefore, as Yachang was also a Buddhist city, there was practically no Taoist monasteries. Shen Qiao asked several passerby, but none of them knew any in the city. It wasn't until he asked an old man that he received an answer. There's Bailong Monastery in the west of the city, but there's only one abbot and 2 young priests. I know where we're going. Normally it's fairly lonely. Few people go there. It's interesting to see the religious aspect, too, in this as well. Like to see the whole thing with Taoism and Buddhism and how in the Buddhist city that there's not any places for him to stay. Like, that's interesting. Shen Qiao thanked the old man, and after some searching, he quickly found Bailong Monastery. From the outside, the only words Bailong Monastery on the wooden plaque were still crisp and legible. The rest of the building was scarred over with moss, and the roof tiles were decayed. It had probably been many years since the place had been last cleaned and repaired. The old man had said 2 young priests, but the gates were unlatched. As Shen Qiao walked all the way into the courtyard, he nary saw a shadow. He raised his voice and called out a few times. Finally, a boy priest came out yawning. "Why has this gentleman come?" "May we yawn?" Shen Qiao bowed and cupped his hands. "May I ask this young Taoist priest if a group of people had come to stay in the past few days? Their leader is a young man, and following him should be a young woman and 2 older men. Perhaps a number of disciples as well. The young man has a red mole beneath his ear. They may or may not be wearing Taoist robes." The boy priest shook his head. "No, our monastery has always been cold and lonely, day and night. It's been a long time since anyone's come here." Shen Qiao was a little disappointed. Seeing that the sky was growing dark, he asked, "Well, then are there empty guest rooms available? This one wishes to stay the night." "There are," said the boy priest, "but they haven't been cleaned in a while. You'd have to clean them yourself." "Many thanks," said Shen Qiao. "As long as there's somewhere I can stay. May I ask if the abbot is here, young priest? As I'm borrowing a room from the host, I must at least thank him." "Oh, no need," said the boy. "My master doesn't meet with outsiders, and in the end, you are only borrowing a room, not money. Whether or not you see him doesn't matter." He led Shen Qiao through the monastery's main hall, bringing him to one of the rooms in the back courtyard. When he pushed open the doors, they were greeted with a full face of musty air, age-old and thick with dust. The boy himself began coughing incessantly, his hand fanning hard before his nose. "Oh, look, it's so dirty. Do you really want to sleep here?" He looked at Shen Qiao. Shen Qiao gave it a brief scan. The bed was a little dirty, but there was a broom and a dust cloth, and along with the well outside, it would be good enough with a quick cleaning. His lodgings hadn't been that luxurious or comfortable back when he'd been honored as the sect leader of Zhandu Mountain either. "I'll be fine, thank you, young priest." Since he'd said so, the boy let him be. We don't eat after noontime, so the stove isn't burning. If you want to eat, you'll have to cook something yourself. The kitchen has kettles and cups, but no rice or flour. If you want to buy something to eat, there's a market across the street outside. You should go quickly, though, since they'll be closing soon." With this kind of hospitality, no wonder the monastery drew few pilgrims to stay at, even though they were located in the capital. Beyond the residents simply esteeming Buddhism, it seemed the host's attitude itself was a problem. But Shen Qiao didn't complain. He only smiled, giving a positive reply to everything the boy had said. Once the child had left, he began cleaning, spraying water, sweeping, and scrubbing the cot. Not an Airbnb! Not much later, the boy returned, excitement shining on his face. "Sir, quickly come look. There are so many carriages outside, all carrying so many things, and they say it's all for you." What? Chapter 44. Qinggong returns the sandwiches. "Did they give their name?" asked Shen Qiao. "They didn't," said the boy. "Hurry up and look." He'd grown up in the monastery and had never seen such a grand procession before. Without waiting for Shen Qiao's answer, he was already running to get the abbot, shouting the entire way. Shen Qiao walked to the entrance, and sure enough, several carriages were parked there, and several chests were being unloaded from them. Their leader was dressed like a servant, but he didn't seem like an ordinary servant. Judging from his appearance and clothing, he was at least an attendant who'd served his master directly. When the man saw Shen Qiao arrive, he took a step forward but didn't come any closer. "May I ask if you're Shen Qiao?" "I am." "By the order of Duke of Pengchong County, this one comes to deliver gifts." Shen Qiao already had his suspicions, but he still had to ask, "Who is the Duke of Pengchong County? I fear I do not know him." Displeasure rose to the man's face, and he simply said, "The Duke of Pinchong County says that once you showed him kindness, and that a drop of kindness should be repaid in abundance. Hence, he commanded this one to deliver these gifts, and hopes that this gentleman will graciously accept them." Without waiting for Shen Qiao's reply, he clapped, saying to the coachman and other servants, "Open the chests!" Right then the abbot of Bailong Monastery ran out with the 2 boy priests, ready to receive the newcomers. They didn't have time to greet Shen Qiao before their attention was drawn by the opening of the chests. Straight away they gasped. Not a gasp of awe, but rather they were in disbelief. For inside the chest wasn't gold or treasure or silks or satins. They were crammed full of donkey meat sandwiches. The moment they were open, the steaming aroma of donkey meat burst forth, wafting in their faces. All at once, the 3 of them gulped helplessly, their mouths watering. The servant's expression was disdainful as he sneered. The Duke of Pengchong County asked this lowly one to pass these words on for him. That day he was able to eat a couple of sandwiches by your grace. Today he wishes to repay you tenfold. We fear these chests may not be enough. If they aren't, the lowly one will deliver for a few more chests. Shen Qiao showed neither anger nor fear. On the contrary, he smiled. This is enough. I was just brooding over what to do for dinner since the monastery stove isn't on. Many thanks to your master for his timely help. Now my meals are covered for the next few days. The servant probably hadn't expected such a reaction from Shen Qiao. He started briefly, and then the contempt on his face grew deeper. He obviously felt Shen Qiao was acting far too meek. After all, the reason his master was using this method to repay Shen Qiao must have been because the man had once offended him. With this in mind, the man shook Shen Qiao he took him to be of little consequence and added, "Then this lowly one will return and report to my master." He made a gesture and the chests around him were tipped, dumping the donkey meat sandwiches out onto the ground. Alarmed, the abbot and the 2 boys cried out, "What are you doing? The sandwiches were perfectly fine and now they're all dirty." The servant laughed. The master said to deliver the sandwiches, but he never said to deliver the chests. The donkey meat sandwiches were spilled all over the ground, their juices gushing out. A swarm of insects was quickly drawn in by the aroma, and they buzzed around the heap. Even if the priests wanted to pick them up, clean them off, and eat them, they didn't dare to now. All they could do was choke down their anger. Sorrow written all over their faces, they stared at the sandwiches. Shen Qiao's smile finally faded, and his expression darkened a touch. Back in that dilapidated temple, Chen Gong couldn't even afford a single sandwich. One hot meal had been enough to delight him, and yet today he could go this far to satisfy a passing caprice. Could power and glory truly cloud one's eyes? Or is one's environment truly potent enough to change their personality? Wait. The servant paused in his steps and looked back. Does this gentleman have further instructions? Finish these sandwiches before you leave. The servant burst out laughing. This gentleman jests! These are the master's gifts for this gentleman. How can we eat them? Please take your time and enjoy. He turned around, but before he'd taken more than a couple of steps, his gloating smile quickly transformed into horror. Because from his wrist came an unbearable pain, and Shen Qiao, who'd been standing 10 steps from him just a moment before, was suddenly right in front of his eyes. The servant's face twisted in agony. Let's go! Let's go! Food is bestowed by the heavens. It must be treasured, Shen Qiao said severely. There are many people starving outside the city, so I must trouble you to eat these sandwiches before you leave. The servant was shocked, fearful, and angry all at once. How dare you? Do you know who we are? The Duke of Pengchong County is His Majesty's favorite. Shen Qiao's expression was indifferent. I don't know any Duke of Pengchong County. If you don't eat these, none of you will leave today. Still, some simply refused to accept their fate. One of the coachmen turned and ran. He hadn't managed 3 steps before abruptly falling face first to the ground, completely unable to move. Will you eat? Asked Shen Qiao. You'll regret this, Shen Qiao, said the servant. If you dare humiliate me, one day my master will pay you back 1,000-fold. Will you eat? You wouldn't dare! His voice transformed into a scream. He screamed wretchedly, and in an instant his facade of bravado transformed into an expression of anguish. Shen Qiao was only holding his wrist, but no one knew what technique he'd used. Though the servant's wrist showed no sign of fracture or injury, his face was contorted in unbearable agony. A chill ran down every onlooker's spine. Will you eat? Asked Shen Qiao. His tone was as calm and placid as ever, but his eyes shifted from the servant, turning onto the rest. Everyone whom his gaze swept across bowed their heads in return, not daring to meet his eyes. By this point, the servant was now thoroughly cowed. Even his voice had changed completely, and now it trembled as he spoke. We must let this gentleman know. Our master only asked us to deliver the sandwiches. He didn't tell this lowly one to dump them out. It was this lowly one's own idea. This lowly one begs for your forgiveness. He knows your great self is magnanimous, so please don't hold it against him. If you don't want me to hold it against you, then finish the sandwiches, said Shen Qiao. Otherwise, I fear that when I settle accounts with your master, he'll be sure to take out his anger on you. You should consider things carefully. The servant longed to weep, but all he could do was get down on all fours, pick up the sandwiches, and begin eating. The fallen sandwiches were already cold, and as they entered the servant's mouth, he could feel the grit and sand mixed in them. Ever since he'd started serving qigong, he'd been eating better than most well-off families did. Never had there been food like this, that even the manners dogs would refuse. He was on the verge of tears from the very first bite, but Shen Qiao was still watching him, so he had to swallow mouthful by mouthful. He looked as if he was being force-fed poison. When he noticed his fellows were just staring at him blankly, he roared, "Well, hurry up and help me eat!" The very fiber of their being screamed in reluctance, but their master valued the servant greatly, so all they could do was crouch down alongside him and start eating as well. Ever since he became the emperor's new favorite, the Duke of Pengchong County had been the talk of the town. Even the monastery's abbot had heard of him. When he saw Shen Qiao treat these people with such complete and utter lack of courtesy, he gaped, astonished. One of the boy priests pulled in the corner of his master's robe. "Shifu," he whispered. "Won't we get dragged into the middle of things if the Duke of whatever county returns to settle scores?" The abbot twisted around to look at him and dropped his voice low. "Shut up! Don't you see how amazing our visitor's martial arts are?" Shen Qiao heard him but pretended not to. After each man had finished about a dozen sandwiches, they cried miserably they truly couldn't eat any more, begging Shen Qiao to let them go. However, there were at least a few dozen sandwiches still on the ground. Shen Qiao shook his head. "If I let you bring them back with you, I'm sure you'll throw them out along the way. So you must finish them all here, or you can forget about leaving." The servant was trembling in terror. "Sir, this lonely one's master is still awaiting his report." "If you don't get back in time, he'll just dispatch more people here. Wouldn't that give you more mouths to help you eat?" The servant dared not make another sound. Agonized, he lowered his head and went back to eating. All the way from evening until nightfall, the dozen or so men ate and ate, gobbling and gulping down the food. It wasn't until their stomachs were stretched round and taut, their faces ashen, that Shen Qiao let them finally stop. It was like they'd been granted great amnesty. They could barely stand up straight and had to support each other as they respectfully came before Shen Qiao, begging for forgiveness. "Go back and tell your master I'm only passing through and won't be staying for long. I'll leave tomorrow, so there's no need to come here and harass the abbot." The servant forced a smile. "Surely Shen Gongji jests. How could we dare?" In truth, Shen Qiao had seen right through him. That was exactly his plan, what his plan had been. Shen Qiao didn't say anything more and let them leave. Once the fiends had walked some distance away, the abbot finally came up to Shen Qiao and sighed. "Sir, you've brought quite a bit of trouble to our monastery. We've always lived as recluses and never caused any problems, and yet today misfortune has befallen us. Just what did we do to deserve this?" "You need not worry," said Shen Qiao apologetically. "This has nothing to do with you. Tomorrow I'll find the person in question and clear things up. They won't come looking for you anymore." The abbot was still somewhat displeased. "Well, that'd be for the best." Shen Qiao fished several copper coins from his sleeve and handed them to him. "I've caused you a lot of trouble. I don't have much on me, but please, accept my token of sincerity. Take it as money for incense. I hope that that's enough." The abbot's expression finally lightened a little. He glanced at his two disciples, both of whom were looking back at him. With a cough, he gathered his sleeves and tucked the coins into his hands. "But just barely. It's late and the cold winds are harsh. Please, come inside and rest." Shen Qiao smiled and went inside with them. These two boy priests had thought there'd been donkey meat sandwiches to enjoy, and instead, they'd been put through a mess. No sandwiches, but at least they'd gotten a good show out of it. While the abbot worried they'd offended someone, the boy priests were bubbling over with excitement, especially the one who'd earlier received Shen Qiao so listlessly. His attitude had completely changed, and he was practically glowing as he gazed at Shen Qiao. Oh, Shen Longjun, do you know who's behind him? He's the Duke of Pengchong County, the Emperor's new favorite official. I heard that for him, the Emperor was even willing to... The rest of his sentence disappeared, cut off by the pain of the abbot's slap on the back of his head. What are you saying at your age? The abbot scolded. The boy cradled his head, feeling wounded and sulky. But Shifu, you're the one who told us. The abbot rolled his eyes. Hurry up and cook already. Your Shifu's about to starve to death. Didn't your esteemed self say not to eat after noon? That's on a normal day when we're living peaceful, reclusive lives. Of course 2 meals are enough then. But today we've got thrown into hot water, and for what? I'm practically starving from anger. If you don't want to eat, then at least think about your Shifu. I've only heard of anger making you full, not hungry, the boy mumbled. The abbot raised his hand again, and he quickly darted away. I'm gonna go cook! Wretched disciple. Though displeased, the abbot patted the other boy's head. Chewy's always running amok. Shiwu is still the best behaved. Shiwu smiled shyly, and then raised his head to ask Shen Qiao. Shen Longjun, our monastery doesn't have many ingredients, so we can only make simple things. Please forgive us. Would your honored self like to eat noodles or rice? The abbot was aghast. You child of bad luck! I just praised you and you're already strutting about. That flower is for New Year's. Just as the words left him, the abbot knew he'd said too much. He quickly glanced at Shen Qiao and then awkwardly shut his mouth. Shiwu laughed. Shen Longjun is our guest, and Shifu was always teaching us to mind our manners. I'll go out and help our Shizhong. He scampered off before the abbot could reply. A child of bad luck, the abbot muttered, thinking he had been really awfully unfortunate today. Not only were there no donkey meat sandwiches, but they were even going to rob him of the tiny bit of flour that he'd saved. As if sensing his thoughts, Shen Qiao fished out a couple more coppers from his sleeve. He smiled as he handed them over. I deeply apologize for making you spend so much on me. Hey, that's not what I meant. The abbot wasn't shameless enough to accept the money and pushed it back towards him. At this close distance, he finally realized there was something wrong with Shen Qiao's eyes. Your eyes? It's due to an old illness, said Shen Qiao. They're better in the daytime, but I still can't see very well at night. Ah, said the abbot. Such a pity. He didn't spend more time on the topic of eyesight. By the way, he asked, how did this gentleman offend the Duke of Pengchong County? Shen Qiao briefly told him about meeting Qinggong when they were both in poverty and how they'd traveled together. When the abbot heard about Qinggong bringing Mu Tipu to look for Shen Qiao, and how he'd wanted to pass his predicament on to Shen Qiao by recommending him to Mu Tipu, he couldn't stop himself from cursing. Repaying kindness with enmity, shameless bastard! Thinking about the scene he'd just witnessed, he sighed. If you want to look for him, Shen Longjun, make sure you make adequate preparations. A glance was enough to see that the servant was a vile man. He's sure to exaggerate the events in his report to make Qinggong resent you even more. I'm grateful for the abbot's reminder, said Shen Qiao, but there's one thing I still want to ask. Has the abbot seen a group of people these days? There are 2 seniors among them, while the rest are young men and women, and all of them are very good looking. They may or may not be wearing Taoist robes, but they should be carrying swords. Have you seen a group of hot people? Those are my people. Although he'd asked the boy priest earlier, he couldn't quite bring himself to give up and decided to ask again. The abbot thought for a moment and then shook his head. I have not. Taoism isn't popular in Yangcheng, and though there are many Buddhist shrines and temples, when it comes to Taoist priests, other than our Bailong monastery here, there aren't many other monasteries. If they wished to stay in one, it's almost certain that they'd come here. And if they didn't come here, then they definitely wouldn't go to another one. Perhaps they've changed their clothes and gone to stay at an inn. However, Shenlong, if you want to find someone, you can't do it like this. If they were to deliberately hide their tracks and not enter the city at all, it'd be very easy for you to miss them. Besides, are you certain that they've been heading north? Shen Qiao smiled wryly. That's true. I'm only clinging to a strand of hope myself. As they were talking, a boyish voice came from the kitchen. Shifu, Shen Longjun, the food is ready. The abbot automatically quickened his steps and then remembered that Shen Qiao was still beside him. He stopped himself abruptly and smiled at him, embarrassed. Come, let's go eat. Dinner could not have been simpler. Flour and water already in the monastery had been kneaded and rolled into noodles. There wasn't even a drop of oil in the dish, let alone any meat. Just plain noodles, left dry. A smattering of chopped vegetables for toppings and some homemade pickled radishes mixed in. But for the 3 priests, it was enough to make their eyes shine. The abbot gulped down a mouthful of saliva and said to the junior disciple, "Serve our guest first." "Yes, Shifu." The disciple was an honest server. He immediately piled Shen Qiao's bowl full of noodles, pickled radishes, and vegetables until it nearly crested the little peak. The sight of this pained the abbot so much that he just had to object. "Enough, enough! If you give the guest any more, he won't be able to finish." Shen Qiao smiled in agreement. "Yes, a little is enough for me. Don't give me too much." While they were playing a game of deference, another series of knocks came from the monastery's gates outside. In the quiet of the night, the sound was crisp and striking, and their hearts thumped despite themselves. The two boy priests looked at each other. Why is there a guest when it's already so late? It couldn't be that bunch from earlier back to make trouble, right? "Shifu, should we pretend that we didn't hear anything?" The abbot was also somewhat perturbed. "Why don't we wait a moment? Maybe he'll stop knocking after a while." "It can't be them, Shifu," the senior disciple said doubtfully. "If they were back to pick a fight, they would have just gotten in by kicking the gates down. They'd at least smash the door in. Why would they just keep knocking like this? Is it some kind of ghost?" "Enough with the nonsense," snapped the abbot. "You should learn something useful instead of constantly listening to those absurd ghost tales they tell beneath the bridge. I'm going to go see just who is causing a disturbance this late at night." "I'll go," says Shen Qiao. "You 3 go ahead and eat. There's no need to worry." The abbot stood with him. "Well, no, it'll be hard on your eyes." Shen Qiao pressed the abbot down by his shoulder. "Don't worry. I'm used to it now. I can still make things out. Just lend me a lantern." The junior disciple brought him a lantern straight away, and the abbot sat back down. On the inside, he was fretting over cooling his noodles, but his words were courteous. "Well, be careful then. If something's not right, call us for help." "All right," said Shen Qiao. "You eat first." Carrying the lantern, he walked towards the entrance. Bailong Monastery was quite large, and he could still faintly feel the magnificence of its former years. But with the passage of time had fallen into disrepair, and now the mighty monastery had only 3 priests left to watch it. Walking through the desolate halls at night, a lament couldn't help but stir in one's heart. Shen Qiao had also thought that Qinggong had sent more troublemakers their way, but when he opened the door, the pitch-black darkness greeted him with neither clamor nor commotion. Instead, there was a lone man standing there, with his hands clasped behind his back, his figure and pose overwhelmingly familiar. He didn't even need to raise the lantern to know who the man was. Surprised, he blurted out, "Sect Leader Yan." "What?" said Yang Wushi. "Not happy to see me?" Under the light of the moon, a sincere, welcoming smile bloomed on Shen Qiao's face. His lantern still in hand. "Well, of course I am. Hurry up and come in. Have you eaten?" Oh, Yang Wushi didn't mean to answer in such an inane question, but as he opened his mouth, he somehow found himself saying, "Not yet." Shen Qiao laughed. "Well, then you're just in time. Hurry inside. The priests have boiled some noodles." He could still make things out in the daytime, but when night fell, his eyesight grew worse. Even with the lantern, he couldn't see well. That, combined with the monastery's unfamiliar layout, made him stumble a little as he brought Yang Wushi inside. He nearly fell face down right there. This was the martial artist who'd killed Huo Zhijing, who'd forced Duan Wenyang to withdraw. Yet he tripped over a couple of stones. If word got out, people would split their sides laughing. Luckily, an arm stretched over just in time to wrap around Shen Qiao's waist and stop his fall. "You're in a bit of a rush today. That's unusual," said Yang Wushi. Shen Qiao stifled a laugh and smiled but didn't follow up. "The noodles are getting cold," he said instead. "You haven't eaten yet. Let's hurry." By the time that he brought Yang Wushi into the kitchen, the abbot was already slurping up the last noodle. "Shen Longjun, you returned too late," he said, rubbing his bulging belly. "The noodles are already gone." Shen Qiao introduced Yang Wushi to them. "This is my friend, surname Yan." The junior disciple stood up. "Shen Longjun, I left a bowl for your esteemed self. You can share it with Yang Longjun." The abbot rolled his eyes at him. "You busybody!" He'd been about to complain about getting a second visitor, that they'd only saved one bowl, but when he saw Yang Wushi standing behind Shen Qiao, he found himself swallowing down his words. His stern abbot face almost slipped entirely in front of Yang Wushi, and he began to feel anxious. In the end, he could only stand dropping a "take your time eating" before leaving in a hurry. The junior disciple who had brought over the bowl of noodles for Shen Qiao some time ago looked awkwardly at Yang Wushi. "There's only one bowl," he said. The noodles had already begun to clump together. It was unlikely that Yang Wushi would eat such a thing, even if someone begged him to. But to the members of Bailong Monastery, it was a precious bit of food that they'd been saving for several months, and had even been set aside for the new year. and yet they'd brought it out early for Shen Qiao's arrival. Shen Qiao thanked the boy and then said to young Wushi, "Shall I share with you?" "No need." Shen Qiao laughed. "Although the noodles are a bit cold, their pickled radish is quite spectacular. You should try some." Young Wushi was particular about cleanliness, so Shen Qiao washed the chopsticks first before turning to the pickled radish and chopped vegetables in the bowl, selecting those that hadn't touched the noodles. He fished them out and placed them in a bowl in front of young Wushi and then poured some of the sauce over the remaining dry, clumpy noodles that had began to eat. Young Wushi furrowed his brow, staring at the half-full bowl of vegetables and pickled radish before him. It was a long time before he picked up his chopsticks and gave them a taste. The flavor wasn't as awful as he'd imagined. "Has Sect Leader Yan concluded his business?" asked Shen Qiao. "Not yet," was all Young Wushi replied. He spoke nothing about whether he'd met the person or why he wasn't finished, and Shen Qiao didn't ask. But then Young Wushi changed the topic entirely. "Were you happy to see me just now?" Shen Qiao started and then nodded and smiled. "Yes. I thought that once we'd parted it would be a long time before we met again. I didn't expect it would happen so soon. Is that not something to be happy about?" "Just now when you introduced me, you called me your friend." Young Wushi ran his finger along the edge of his bowl, his expression amused. The bowl was of very poor craftsmanship, and because it had been in use for a while, it was covered in a thick layer of grime, the type that could no longer be washed off. "Yes, calling you my friend makes things simpler when we're out and about. People won't question it." Young Wushi stared straight at him. "Oh, and what do you think? Do you see my venerable self as your friend deep down inside? Having the same master, harboring the same ambitions, such are enough to make people friends. Sect Leader Yan and I share neither master nor ambition, but you saved my life, and that connection is by no means a shallow one. What's more is we've spent quite some time traveling together, and surely that is enough to make us friends. Do you not fear people saying that you're beholden to the demon lord, that you've abandoned yourself to degeneracy?" Shen Qiao laughed. "I know what I'm doing, and that's good enough. Why should I care what others think? The things I've seen and heard since leaving the mountain have moved me deeply. Even more, they've made me understand that the path I insisted on, the Tao I practiced in the remote mountains, was but a trivial one. Sect Leader Yan assists the Lord of Zhou so that he can one day unite the lands and bring peace to the world, so the common folk need not be refugees and exchange their children for food. So that as long as they have hands and feet, they can work and reap the rewards. What Sect Leader Yan practices, that is probably the true great Tao." Young Wushi sneered. "There's no need to flatter this venerable one, so you and Yang and I are both in it for ourselves. Everything I've done, I did because I wanted to do it. I never did it out of consideration for other people. Even if something was done with wicked intentions, as long as it leads to good results, that would still count as attaining the Tao, would it not?" Young Wushi stared at him unswervingly for a moment, and after a long time he said, "And so we're friends." Shen Qiao nodded and smiled. "If Sect Leader Yan doesn't disdain me for trying for someone out of my league." A strange expression flitted across Young Wushi's face, but only for an instant. Before Shen Qiao could get a clear grasp on what it was, Young Wushi had resumed his languid, nonchalant manner. "This monastery is truly rather crude. Does it even have a place to sleep?" Shen Qiao laughed. "I can only ask you suffer through sharing a room with me for now." We made some progress this week. Can I just say this has been the best set of chapters so far in the entire novel? In the entire series, chapters 42 through 44 have been the best chapters and the most interesting chapters and the starkest difference between the donghua to the novel and in the audio drama. And I'm worried because as I throw this to Huckleberry, my fear is that I know what's coming. Song Jijing is coming, and I'm like, oh, we made this so good in the novel that I'm not looking forward to what is about to happen with Young Wushi and Shen Qiao. I'm not looking forward to it. It's not going to be a fun time. There are some differences. There are some stark differences between the novel and the donghua, and even in the audio drama, there are some differences. For the record, episode 10 of the audio drama, season 1, is the best episode of the audio drama. I know the audio drama is split into 2 seasons. So far, episode 10 is the best episode. It is great. There's little added things we're going to talk about. I've compiled a list in my notes. You all can't see it. I'm looking at it on the screen. I've compiled a list of notes. I also went back. I'm recording this late at night. I went back and was starting to realize, I was like, wait a minute. The donghua is a little bit different from this. So I went back to episodes 9, 10, 11, and where this ends is like halfway through episode 12 of the donghua. So we're getting almost close to catching up. And honestly, we're not even, where are we at in the novel in terms of this? We are at repaying kindness, Shen Qiao weeps, oh man. And then Shen Gong returns the sandwiches. Holy shit, that was a great chapter. That was a great chapter. Wow. So, the audio drama ends differently than the novel, by the way. So yeah, we're literally halfway through the second volume, and we still have 3 more sections of chapters to go before we're done with it. Oh my gosh. It's like everything's going so well and doing great, and I know in my heart, I'm like, it's about to get really sad. And I'm like, no, Wushi, you son of a bitch, things were going well. You made a friend. But what's interesting is the novel is playing Wushi very close to the vest. He is shrouded in mystery in this, which is so fascinating to me. And I kind of want to go through and talk with you all about some of the differences. So we're going to pick blue because blue is what our boys are wearing. So we're on chapters 42 through 44. And we're going to talk about the donghua. And we're going to talk about the novel. And we're going to talk about the audio drama, because they are 3 somewhat different adaptations at this point. And that's kind of cool to see them like branching out. Like up until now, there's been like little differences with the censorship and things like that. And you get why they can't show you the kiss in the novel and all that with the censorship. But there's some changes that have started to come up that I'm like, interesting. So in the start, we might as well start with the novel for chapter 42. And that's where Shen Qiao has not really much to say left to Bairong. He basically is like, no, I'm here to defend Wushi. He saved my life. I owe him. I don't think it's right that you all are killing him. He can't even put up a fight right now. Of course, he realizes later, he's like, well, they couldn't have done much to you, could they? And Wushi's like, no. And Shen Qiao's like, well, I didn't know that. So, and Bairong tries to use this drug to, like, stop him from moving so that she can, but she says she's not going to kill Wushi. She's gonna give him a concussion that will make him dumber. And I'm like, girl, I don't know if that's gonna work for you. I don't know if that's how concussions work. But regardless, it doesn't end up panning out because Shen Qiao doesn't inhale enough poison to totally incapacitate him. Instead, he inhales just enough where it slows him down, but he's still able to stop her. And I mean, let's be real. At this point, the novel is establishing Shen Qiao's like kind of devotion to Wushi at the risk of himself. Now, does Wushi take note of that? Probably, because he was able to kind of know what was going on at the time. Do I think that Wushi is concerned that Shen Qiao is going to hurt himself in his devotion to Wushi? I don't think Wushi cares, to be honest. But I don't think that he is ignorant of it. I think if anything, I mean, at the most, if you were really wanting to say Wushi was feeling for Shen Qiao, at the most, he recognizes that Shen Qiao is willing to hurt himself to save him, and he may not like that. But at the least, he's just like, okay, whatever. He's not lovey-dovey. Wushi is not lovey-dovey at this point. There's a moment, though. There's a moment where he wavers, and I was like, ooh! But we're not there yet. We're far from it. So he manages to fend off Bairong. She senses Wushi waking up, and she ends up piecing out while he and Chi Deviation manages to get a hold of Shen Qiao. Now, I will make note, there's a little bit of difference. In the audio drama, this stuff has already happened in the previous audio drama episode. The stuff where Wushi chokes Shen Qiao happened in episode 9 of the audio drama. That's where it ended. So that part I'd already listened to. In the donghua, In the donghua, there's a very different ending to this scene than there is in the novel. A very different ending. In this, Yang Wushi, he chokes Shen Qiao and then has this moment of realization and is like, oh shit, I choked Shen Qiao, and he feels bad for it seemingly. But in this version, Yang Wushi is very weak as well, and Shen Qiao carries him back. And then it kind of, I always felt like, I thought that was always very interesting. And in comparison to the novel, I like the novel a lot more. I like the novel. Let me just go ahead and say, this is my winner. The novel is my winner. The audio drama is really good. The donghua is good, but the novel's my winner. I was like, ooh. But in this version, Shen Qiao carries him back, which always felt kind of odd to me because it doesn't feel odd that Shen Qiao carried Yang Wushi back because he, is not the type of person to leave somebody behind, and he went through all that trouble defending him. Why would he leave him? So it makes sense. But as soon as he gets back to the inn, he's like, okay, good, bye, and pieces out. And that always struck me as kind of odd. I was like, that's sort of a very kind of weird thing to do. In the novel, Shen Qiao gets choked by Yang Wushi through chi deviation, and we find out that Yang Wushi was trying to isolate himself to not go into chi deviation any further, but he's not, down and out. Yang Wushi is still very powerful, and it makes sense for Shen Qiao to have hurt himself fighting Li Yu, fighting Bai Rong, and then getting choked and nearly strangled by Yang Wushi. So Shen Qiao is on death's door again. And then Yang Wushi's like, you could have killed me. And he's like, well, why would I do that? And he's like, why wouldn't you? And he's like, because, I need to repay your debt. And he's like, you're my debt? He's like, I saved you on a whim. He's like, I just want to see you break down. Someone who had nothing, who was betrayed and abandoned by your dearest kin. I wanted to see if you'd be able to endure the shock and lose your mind. And he's like, saving me is saving me. Doesn't matter anything else. And then that's when in the novel, Yang Wushi's like, you should have been a Buddhist. You'd have been a cultivated monk by now with, how soft you are. And so then he's like, at this point in the novel, Yang Wushi makes himself very clear in the novel. He says, I just saved you on a whim and to see if you would break. Which we'll know in the next few chapters is unfortunately where Yang Wushi's going to go right back to. He starts to get pulled to the light side. He starts to get pulled to the side of humanity, and then he's just like, no, and gets all angsty and against it. We'll see how it goes down in the novel next week, but I'm like, you get close, Yang Wushi, and then you just try to be a tsundere and pull right back against him. But Shen Qiao defends his decision, saying, one, saving me is saving me, and I'm not taking it back, no take backsies. But also, Shen Qiao reveals in the novel at this point that he views Yang Wushi and his agenda as a boon for the kingdom. He views it as something good. He's like, I think what you're doing and the emperor that you're supporting, I think you all have the best odds of leading our country to peace. And Yang Wushi's like, I'm not doing it for the civilians. I'm doing it for myself. And Shen Qiao's like, that's fine. But I think that what you're doing is the best decision, and I want to support you in what you're doing. And Yang Wushi doesn't really know what to do with that. He's just like, But what I like about the novel scene is that in the novel and in the audio drama, Yang Wushi saves Shen Qiao from the mountainside and carries him back on his back, which is a very different thing than what happens in the donghua. In this, Yang Wushi carries him back. Another thing that's in this is in the donghua, I had pointed this out in the donghua that in this, I was going to put this down and I didn't write it down here. Yang Wushi's carried back by Shen Qiao, unlike in the novel where it is reversed. And I also have on here that instead of Li Yu, in the donghua, Duan Wenyang. I was like, I didn't mention this last week because my mind was still wrapping around it, but I was like, wait a minute. I was like, why do I not know this Li Yu person? I'm sure I'm recording this ahead of time because of my trip, so I haven't looked at the comments for last week's episodes yet. I'm sure many of you have commented on it. I'm going to address it in the comments. But I was like, who's Li Yu? I don't think I remember them in the donghua because they weren't. In the donghua, it was Duan. Duan Wenyang was there instead of Li Yu, which I get why they didn't put Li Yu in the donghua because that character doesn't seem to show up any other time in the content that's covered by the donghua, so I get it. And Duan is a known character and you'd put him there and it was epic at the time and I get it. This makes a lot more sense. The fact that it's Li Yu makes a lot more sense in the novel. But yeah, in the donghua, I get it. You were trying to just make it more epic and use a character that you already had, but now it makes more sense. But yeah, so Yang Wushi carrying Shen Qiao back, it adds to this moment, and I think Shen Qiao is kind of catching on to it subconsciously, and it's kind of why he's so happy to see Yang Wushi and all of this, because, I mean, if Yang Wushi didn't care about Shen Qiao, if he really didn't care, he would have left him at the cave and walked off and been like, save yourself. Like he has done in the past. He would have left him in the cave and been like, you'll make it back to the end. And when you make it back, I'll see you then, I guess. Didn't do it. Instead, what he does in this is that, first he scares Li Yu off and like flings the rock at him and it slices his ear and then it makes him run even faster away. And Bai Rong at that point, it's like, peace out, I gotta go. That in itself, one, we're going to put Yang Wushi down here. Like little subtle things. Like Yang Wushi sparing Li Yu and Bai Rong. I mean, he says he's sparing Bai Rong. I get why he would spare Bai Rong because she's part of the demonic sect and he doesn't want to ruffle any more feathers right now. He's not back to his full strength. He's like, I'm not going to worry about her. I don't want to get other people mad and bring more unnecessary drama on myself. Why would I do that? But with Li Yu tried to kill him. Yan Wushi from earlier in volume 1 would have killed him right back and just laughed while Shen Qiao was like, why'd you kill him, Yan Wushi? Like, he would have done that. But he doesn't do that this time around. Instead, he spares him, which is like, that seems almost out of character for Yan Wushi. And then he carries Shen Qiao back, which, granted, you could argue that he's been helping, he's carried Shen Qiao bridal style before, but there's always been a mockery with it, and there's always been some kind of flirtiness with it and trying to, like, get under his skin. There's nothing about that in the way that he carries him back this time. He's like, oh no, he carries him back. He's like, you climbed all the way up this mountain and ignored all these dangers to protect me. How could I not do you a favor? You don't like seeing me kill people, so I'll let it go this time. Not an issue. And it'd be a pity if that little girl Bai Rong died now. With her around, Heiwan Sect has quite a lot of fun to look forward to. And then, here's the thing, too. He goes to lift up and carry Shen Qiao bridal style, but then realizes that he's got this slash on his back, and he's like, well, then I'll just carry you on my back. What Yan Wushi would have done that a volume ago? Not one that we see now, but he's doing it now because he's being influenced by Shen Qiao, right? So he does that. That's so crazy. And so then Shen Qiao, like, he gets his strength back, and it makes more sense in the novel that after Shen Qiao gets his strength back, then he's decided that he's going to go leave. So Shen Qiao is going to go look for Gu Shimei and some other of the Zhandu Mountain sect. He's like, look, I need to go talk to some other people that are not necessarily UI's allies and get some insight into their whole view on the situation and what we can do. He's like, I don't think that all of Zhandu Mountain is going to be against me. So I need to go find some allies. I said I was going to do that. Now I've healed up. Now I'm going to go do that. And it makes a lot more sense. And to Yang Wushi's credit, Yang Wushi lets him go. He's like, yep, you got a mission to do. Now, here's the thing. The whole time, Yang Wushi also claims that he has to meet with someone. I'm assuming that someone is Song Jingjing. I'm assuming. But the thing about it is the novel is playing Yang Wushi and his status very close to the vest. Like, they're keeping a lot mysterious about his character, which is very interesting. So, some other things happen in the novel compared to the donghua, mainly about Yuan Qing. So, Yuan Qing wants to get the lowdown on what actually happened between Ruyan versus Yang Wushi, because he wants to try to be able to brag that Yang Wushi won, because their sect is against their sect and all of this. And so Shen Qiao, does he kind of tell a little lie there where he's like, oh, by a little bit Yang Wushi won? Did he? I don't know if he did or not, but that's what Shen Qiao says. And so that causes Yuan Qing to go on this whole escapade against Linchuan Academy and spreading all these rumors and blah, 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 and trying to get Ruyan's goad. Also, Shen Qiao saying that the only good things are my circulation of true qi smoothing out a bit and my eyesight has improved. I can roughly make out light and shadows now. And Yang Wushi saying, what a pity. Again, I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. If he's meaning that it's a pity Shen Qiao isn't getting stronger, or it's a pity that he can't see him, or I'm not exactly sure. I'd be curious to know what you all think that means, because I can't really make out what he's meaning by that. I'm curious what y'all's thoughts are, without spoiling anything, what y'all think that means. But anyway, so Yuan Qing comes to look and see where Shen Qiao is. And in the novel, as well as in the audio drama, in both of these moments, Yang Wushi does not deny that Shen Qiao is his man to Yuan Qing. Definitely not in the audio drama. In the audio drama, Yuan Qing's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I know he's your man, but I wanted to see him off. And Yang Wushi does not deny that at all. I was like, you would think. So we're going to put that on here. Does not deny that Shen Qiao is his man. I mean, for someone playing games with Shen Qiao and just doing it to get a rise out of him, and he doesn't tell Yuan Qing off and being like, come on, idiot, he's not my man, just quit being stupid. He does not deny it. He lets that go quite easily. I was like, oop. And so then, in the novel, Shen Qiao writes a letter to Yuan Qing, just thanking him, for everything that he's done and for just some common courtesies. And he leaves the letter with Ruru. And in the novel, we don't know what happens to the letter. In the audio drama, Ruru asks what Yang Wushi wants to do with the letter, and Yang Wushi says, burn it. So Yang Wushi having a little jealous streak there, whether he wants to admit it or not. I was like, why does it matter? Why wouldn't you just give it to him? I'm sure Yang Wushi could say it's because he doesn't deserve to have it or whatever. But I'm like, come on, we can all see through it just a little bit. So yeah, so Shen Qiao is on his journey and trying to cross the border of Qin and enter Qi. Now, we need to establish a couple things. In episode 9, I went back to look at episodes because I was like, where are we at in the donghua? And what is different from the donghua? Because the moment, I wanted to go back and look at the donghua, the moment that Yang Wushi carried Shen Qiao back, because I was like, that didn't happen in the donghua. I'm pretty sure that Shen Qiao carried Yang Wushi back. So that was a difference. In episode 9, Shen Qiao plays the Go game against the Emperor. I did not realize that whole thing was not in the novel. It's like they substitute out the conversation between Shen Qiao and the Emperor Yu. They take that out and insert the game of Go between them. So that's a little difference between the novel and the donghua. And here's the thing. The whole thing about Juju's needle, I don't know yet if it's donghua only or if it actually has occurred in the novel and the novel is just playing Yang Wushi. The novel is playing close to the vest. They do not want to let us know if anything wrong is going on with Yang Wushi. They do not want to let us know. He's a mystery. He's an enigma. He's a man of mystery right now. In episode 10, Yang Wushi gets the needle struck into him from Juju during the battle with the carriages, but that hasn't been shown or revealed or talked about in the novel yet. And in episode 11, during the duel between Ruyan, Keihui, and Yang Wushi, that's when Bairong reveals to Shen Qiao that there was a needle inside of him. So in the donghua, this whole subplot about Yang Wushi being injured is part of everything. And in the novel, it is not mentioned at all. So I'm like, okay. And also Guang, his whole conversation about knowing Yang Wushi's weaknesses, it's not been talked about either. So they're really keeping Yang Wushi a big old mystery right now. And I'm very curious about that. I'm like, okay, are they saving it for the end of this volume into volume 3 when Shen Qiao's supposed to go rescue him? Is that when it's all going to get revealed? I don't know. We might find out in the next couple weeks. But I was like, okay, all right. So that ends up happening, and Shen Qiao, right at the end of chapter 42, ends up going... So Shen Qiao's been on his way. He's been walking along for about a month now in the novel. In the donghua, it does not seem like that long at all. But he's been walking along for about a month, and he goes to this tea house. In the donghua, he ends up at the traditional spot where Shen Qiao and Yang Wushi normally meet, like the spot where Huo dies and all that. That's where they meet up at. In the novel, it's a random tea house. And just as Shen Qiao thinks that he's just living out his day to day and nothing unusual is happening, then in the tea house, he stumbles across Yang Wushi. And it's this big surprise. So it's like, that's a cool change from the donghua to the novel. It felt more organic than how it appears in the episode. It felt more organic that way, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, so anyway, chapter 43, Shen Qiao weeps, which this, chapter 43 and 44 are, in my mind, 2 of the best chapters so far in the novel. They are really good. They are really good. They are shocking. Shocking and really good. So, sect leader Yan Wushi, is being mighty mysterious, saying that he's looking for someone and hasn't found them yet, and Shen Qiao's looking for someone and hasn't found them yet. And they both talk about, what they need to do. And so Yan Wushi reveals that Yuan Yang has drawn up this plan to conquer Qi, and all of Qi is in terror over the news, and Heiwan sect has begun to splinter from within. So they talk about how Heiwan sect is splintering. And so with that, we find out that Juju wants to get with Huan Yu, but Song Zhijing is like, no, I don't want you to do this. So they had a falling out. She wanted to unite with the clan, which is seemingly what Yang Wushi wants to do. And Song Zhijing was like, no, I don't want to do that. And currently, now Zhang Juju has sent me a message saying that Song Zhijing is in Yaqing and she wants me to help her kill him. So now she wants Yang Wushi to kill Song Zhijing, which that is tall order. Like, no big deal. Just go kill the guy that's the direct disciple of the guy that could beat you in a battle and is utterly terrifying, and all you've done is talk about how nasty he is. Yeah, just go kill him. Easy enough. I'm like, that's weird. So that's suspicious. That's weird. So he says he hasn't pursued the reunification of the demonic sects once the Ryu sect was splintered. Instead, he pursued an ardent relationship with Juju. And in this way, he became a high-ranked elder in Heiwan sect. But he reveled in murder, is a fanatic when it came to beauties and sex, had countless enemies, and has an overwhelming martial prowess. So some say he's in the top 3, some say he's just in the top 10, but he's a formidable opponent, and he's not really concerned with anybody but himself. And so Shen Qiao says, well, they must have worked hard together to establish a Heiwan sect. And I like that Shen Qiao's like, why do they gotta try to kill each other just because they had a fight? I feel like that is foreshadowing, where Shen Qiao is like, just because we fight doesn't mean we can't make up. I feel like that's going to come back at some point in this, maybe sooner rather than later. And Yang Wushi is like, look, you all have no room to talk. Zhangdu Mountain has siblings against each other. It's just, he's like, with the demonic sects, we're just a little bit more extreme about it. So now Song Jijing has created his own faction, and the disciples are just pretending to like Juju, but they are undermining her authority. So it's likely that Zhou wants to have you kill Song Jijing for her, but he's like, wouldn't it be good news if Song Jijing were to die? A Huihuan sect without him, with only Juju, could never contend with us. And once Zhou annexes Qi, it'll stir up, their ability to stir up trouble will be greatly limited as well. So Shen Qiao was like, well, it sounds like this Song Jijing guy is not good news, so you getting rid of him sounds like a good idea, so I can only cheers you as to that, which is gonna make whenever Song Jijing, like, convinces Yang Wushi to, or when Yang Wushi hands over Shen Qiao to him, gonna seem really weird. So we're gonna wait and see how that pans out, but as of right now, Shen Qiao believes that Yang Wushi is gonna try to help Juju get rid of Song Jijing. And he's like, well, have fun with that. Good luck in your endeavors. And then Yang Wushi's like, well, I hope your endeavors go well as well. And they cheers, and it's this moment of, like, game recognizing game, and it's really good. And I'm like, what the fudge is happening? This is great. And so, yeah. Then they have their little moment where they clink glasses, and the fact that they shared, like, it wasn't an indirect kiss. They did just use the same plum bottle, but he poured it into his own bowl and everything. Still, it's a start. It's a start. So Shen Qiao is out to look for Yui's group, hoping he can talk with Gu Shimei. That's his mission. We know that he's going to accomplish that at some point. And then they spend another day together, and then they move off in their separate directions. It's like, okay. Now, this is a little bit different than the donghua. In the donghua, they are together all the way up to the monastery. In the donghua, they don't separate. They stay together from the tea house all the way to the monastery. They don't go their separate ways. They don't do whatever. And I kind of like that they go their separate ways in the novel because, it feels weird saying that because in most donmai, I'm like, I want them to be like glued to the hip together. But in here, one, it adds to the mystery of Yang Wushi, like what's going on with him, what is happening. Two, it gives Shen Qiao some like more time to reflect. And also three, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And that's what ends up happening. But before we can get to them splitting up, before we can get to that, they walk through where all of these beggars are. And this whole thing, like, just like in the donghua, Shen Qiao talks about how he was an orphan and he was adopted by Qi Fengge. And if he hadn't been, he probably would have died in the streets, which Shen Qiao, our poor little orphan bean, like, we love him. And he's just like, you know, if I could, he's like, I would take in a whole, like, sect of these little orphans to raise his disciples. And Yang Wushi's like, whoa, I don't like kids. Yang Wushi's like, life's not fair. He's like, if you take in all these kids, they'd all be like Yui and be ungrateful little brats. And Shen Qiao's like, well, now you don't know that. And he's like, well, you don't know it either. And they just kind of, like, reach a drawl on the subject, and they like agree to disagree about it. But then this whole thing with the child, we're going to talk about how it's different than the donghua, but I just want to say, the novel is the idea that these parents traded their 10-month-old child for another child so they could eat said child is crazy. It's crazy when you think of the possibility that they knew that they were just swapping meat, that the people they were giving their child to was going to eat their child. They just didn't want to be the ones to do it because it would be unbearable. In shock. Like, just the horror of that. In shock. And the way that the novel has Shen Qiao save the kid, and the kid just looks lifeless with no life left in their eyes. And then the moment Shen Qiao's like, what's your name? The boy just tips over motionless, and that's it. The donghua made it a lot not as tragic. The book makes it absolutely horrifying. And I was like, that was like Grave of the Fireflies level of terrifying and horrific and morbid. And I was like, damn, that was crazy. And then the idea that Shen Qiao started crying, and Yan Wushi, correct me if I'm wrong, Yan Wushi wiped Shen Qiao's tears away. What? I was like, just typical things that not friends do. Absolutely crazy. And so Yang Wushi is like, you know, he says no matter how life was difficult it should have at least had some hope for a way out. And I like that Yang Wushi's like, anybody else that would have said that would have been a hypocrite, but not you, Jesus. Not you, Don my Jesus. Not you. Mm-mm. Crazy. And he just calls him naive. He's like, I was willing to be kind to him, but I was a moment too late. If that's not describing Shen Qiao's personality, he's like, I will be kind to you at any moment that I can. If you know, as long as you're innocent and deserve it, I will give you that kindness. Doesn't matter your status, your situation, whatever. If you're a bitch, though, I'm going to give it right back because holy shit, chapter 44. We're going to talk about that in a hot second, but yeah. So, anyway, let's talk about, it's so crazy because the novel and the audio drama have things happening in a slightly different order. The audio drama actually starts out where we get to hear the ruler of Qi's voice, which the ruler of Qi sounds super flamboyant and super flirtatious and super extravagant and just gluttonous and over the top, and it all makes sense why people think the things that they do about him. But in the audio drama, we start out where he's got all these women around him. He's just in this excess. It's just hedonism. And they tell him about the news of Ruyan versus Yang Wushi. And we get these two moments in the audio drama to start out. We get this character named Lu Darin. We don't get to see him in the novel yet. Maybe he'll show up later. But he's like out making this big fuss right outside of Emperor Wei's like brothel that he's at, and he's making this big old scene saying he's going to kill himself if the government doesn't like start caring for the people. And the emperor's like, whatever, you're bluffing, get out of here, we don't care about you, I'm not helping the people, everything's fine here, screw those peasants. That's literally what he says. And so that's a whole big scene. And then in the audio drama, Qin Gong shows up serving the emperor as you would think so, and being all flirty right back, and just diving headfirst into the hedonism. And it's like, okay. And granted, he's 16, but it's like, damn. It's like, you saw what Mutipu was doing and were not dissuaded. You were like, this is how I'm going to climb the ladder. Wild. It makes sense why Shen Qiao's a little bit annoyed at all that, especially after everything he went through. But yeah, so that's in the audio drama, but it is not shown in the novel. And in the donghua, all we get is, we do get the scene where Qin Gong is shown. He's shown as a military officer in the in the donghua. No, he's an escort in the novel. He is a straight up escort in the novel, an escort that's been made into a duke. You know, a title of the duke, as you know. But yeah, so the novel versus the donghua handles this very differently. So in the novel, Shen Qiao is going through this like pauper's village, which the way they describe this, we haven't technically met the Emperor of Qi yet. We've only, in the audio drama, we get to have a scene with him. And it paints a pretty vivid picture of him immediately. In the novel, we get a different type of scene that also paints a very, very clear picture of him, where he creates a pauper village at Hualin Garden inside the capital, and he dresses like a beggar and pretends to be poor so he can know what it feels like in this controlled environment. That's him cosplaying as someone poor is all you need to know about him. Everything about his character is said in that moment alone. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he has Qin Gong as an escort and all that, it says enough. So you get the full picture of the Emperor of Qi without having to even hear two words out of his mouth. But the audio drama, it was fun to hear that scene. It was really cool. So Shen Qiao just happens to lock eyes with Qin Gong for a moment in the novel like he does in the donghua. The difference is in the donghua, again, Yang Wushi and Shen Qiao stay together, whereas by the time Shen Qiao sees Qin Gong in the novel, him and Yang Wushi have parted separate ways. After the kid's death, they go separate ways to go meet whoever they're supposed to meet. Shen Qiao goes to look for his group. Yang Wushi goes to look for his group, and they kind of just part ways amicably enough. But yeah. So then they're like, Consort Fong, she's the one who, you know what? Even Consort Fong has taken a backseat to him. Yeah, the emperor stripped her naked and let the officials pay to look at her. 1,000 gold per view. So yeah, whatever Qinggong's doing is a lot more scandalous than even her. Which I think that Shen Qiao just gets enough of to know what's going down. And he kind of just was like, okay, whatever, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to go to this monastery. I thought the religious part of it was pretty interesting to see that, like, since this place is mostly Buddhist, they don't have a lot of Dao monasteries. And the one they have is kind of, like, dilapidated and has, like, kind of been abandoned over the years and fallen apart. And it just has this abbot and the two, like, kid priests with it. It was neat to see, like, that comparison there, right? But, okay. So, in this version in the novel, Shen Qiao shows up asking for room and board at the monastery, which is, it kind of gets escalated and like subsidized and abridged in the donghua, so we're just going to focus on the novel version right now. But he shows up, Shiwu and Chuyi are there. Shiwu is not the kid we've seen earlier in the donghua. Instead, seems like the first time we've seen him in this, as far as we know. But they're all still there. Shen Qiao still shows up at the monastery, and I'm kind of like Shen Qiao. Whenever he's given, like, he gets shown the room and it's pretty dirty, and he's like, I can make this work. I'm only here a night. You know? He's like, I don't have to be fancy. I can make it work. It's all right. And then he asks where the food is, and the kid's like, well, we don't really have any rice or flour or anything. We don't have any food. And Shen Qiao's like, no wonder y'all don't have guests. That part was really funny. And so then the carriages show up for chapter 44. Which is my favorite chapter so far in the novel, I think. The whole kid scene with the food and the cannibalism was wild and the most morbid thing in this series so far. But chapter 44 is my favorite so far. So let's talk about the the audio drama is exactly like the novel. It's not as good. It's not as good, in my opinion. But yeah. So the difference is, in the donghua, what happens is that Shen Qiao and Yan Wushi are walking. They stumble across the kid that is in the donghua. The kid is starving. He's not about to be getting eaten by his parents, or maybe he is. It's not. I can't quite remember because I was too crazed out how different things went between the novel and the donghua. But in the donghua, the kid is suffering. Yan Wushi and Shen Qiao stop. They lament. The parents fight. And then what happens in the donghua is that Qinggong shows up, looks over, and doesn't just see Shen Qiao, but also sees Yang Wushi with him, and he sends a chest in the donghua, because the budget, a chest of donkey sandwiches, and he just places it in the middle of all of the beggars, and all of the beggars, like a bunch of zombies, go after the sandwiches, and Shen Qiao tries to get one to the kid, and the kid takes a bite and then dies. Which is sad. Not as heartbreaking and morbid as the novel, but still sad. And then Shen Qiao laments, and then they both go to the monastery afterwards, and then have the scene where they're all eating together. And it's a very condensed, abridged, straightforward scene. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's fine. Now that I've read the novel, I hate that scene. Because the novel is so much better. It's so freaking good. And it just flows so much better. Because in the novel, what happens is that Shen Qiao, he spots Qinggong, or he hears about Qinggong. He hasn't technically seen him yet. But he hears about, or no, he does lock eyes with him. But he doesn't know too much about him. And he's just like, okay, whatever. Now this is what you're doing. This is how you're getting by. I mean, work, I guess. And he goes to the monastery to try to just stay the night before he goes back to trying to find his crew. And he's like talking with the abbot and the two young priests. And then Qinggong finds out where Shen Qiao has been staying at and sends all of these carriages, like a whole bunch of carriages, an obscene amount of carriages, with just boxes of donkey sandwiches, like just crates upon crates of donkey sandwiches. And I would imagine if I were Shen Qiao, it says the chests weren't filled with gold or treasure. They were crammed with donkey meat sandwiches. And the Duke of Pengcheng County asks this lowly one to pass on these words for him. That day he was able to eat a couple of sandwiches by your grace, and he wants to repay you tenfold. These chests may not be enough. If they aren't, this lowly one will deliver you some more. And you know what? Someone could assume that getting chests of donkey sandwiches, which apparently are just, I don't know, are they like empanadas, whatever, empanadas? They don't seem like a luxury dish, but they also don't seem like nothing. So Shen Qiao's not mad at this. He's like, okay, cool. Well, good. I'm glad that he decided to repay me back. Nice. We're even now. Okay. We were going to look for food, so this saved us the trouble. Awesome. Problem solved. And then he's like, then we'll return. And so at that point, he tips all of the chests over and dumps the sandwiches onto the ground, which they sound like very meaty, juicy sandwiches that like because you would think like if it were like a calzone or an empanada, if it fell to the ground, it probably wouldn't just like mush. These seem like, to me, the best comparison I can make is a sloppy Joe. A sloppy Joe is like two pieces of bread and like ground meat and a sauce. And the ground meat and the sauce gets really, it lives up to its name. It's a sloppy Joe. So you can try to pick it up and it's going to be very tender and you got to eat it really quickly. Or you could eat it with a fork if you're being fancy. But if a sloppy Joe falls to the ground, it's not going to be worth eating because it's just going to be everywhere and disgusting. That's how I envision the donkey sandwiches falling to the ground in this scene. And so Shen Qiao, who was like, well, thank you for these donkey sandwiches. There's so many of them. We'll be able to eat for 2 days on this. This is really nice. We really appreciate it. The moment they go to the ground, everything changes. And Shen Qiao is so badass in this moment. Because the servants, we find out it was the servants' idea to do this, which that's on them. He's like, the master said to deliver the sandwiches, but never to deliver the chests. And immediately the kids and the abbot, I'm sure Shen Qiao realized when they said they didn't have any food, Shen Qiao realizes how scarce things are for them, and for them to taunt these chests in front of them and all these sandwiches and food, and now they're on the ground and there's bugs all over them and there's dirt and stuff and they're not edible, that Shen Qiao's like, wow, that was a dick move. That was not nice, and I'm not happy. I wanted Yan Wushi to see this scene unfold because this is Shen Qiao being influenced by Yan Wushi. This is Shen Qiao saying, I'm sorry, you're going to eat those sandwiches before you leave. And like they established there are dozens, like 50 or 60 sandwiches. He's like, you're going to eat all of them. Like it's a freaking hot dog eating contest. And I'm not letting you go until you've done all that. I was amazed and in love with Shen Qiao during this whole scene. It was amazing. Oh my God. It was so freaking good and badass. And I'm like, holy hell. Yes. I just how pissed off Shen Qiao is that this happened. And he's not mad at Qinggong at all. He's not mad at Qinggong. Qinggong made them the sandwiches and brought them the food. And I think that Shen Qiao, it's kind of even, it's twofold, because on the one hand, Shen Qiao is, he understands the scarcity of food in this climate, and he's like, okay, that was very nice of him to deliver this food to us. He didn't have to do that. Okay. But the moment Shen Qiao just watched a kid die from malnutrition whose parents were about to eat him alive. Like, he just watched the struggle of these people and their desperation of how much they were willing to lose just to eat. And these bastards just dumped a bunch of perfectly good sandwiches on the ground and they're like, whatever, we just did that because we were bored and we wanted to. No wonder he's pissed. And so he's like, you have no freaking clue how this is. And so he's like, don't you see how amazing our martial arts, our visitors' martial arts are? And Shen Qiao makes him eat all of it. I'm like, hell yeah. I'm like, good. Make him do it. That was such a badass scene. I love that. I loved every minute of that. That was so much fun to read. Damn. And so all I could think about during all this was that Shen Qiao had just said how he wanted to get something to eat and then literally stood there for hours, probably, watching these men eat the sandwiches and then leave and then take their leave. And he's like, well, I'm still hungry. So the kids are like, well, you know what? It's going to get cold outside. So we've probably got something that we can make. And so we discover that the flour that they'd been saving was for New Year's. And then the abbot's kind of ashamed because he doesn't want to admit that they've been hoarding away flour just to make noodles for New Year. Like, that's how desperate they are. That's why Shen Qiao is also pissed off about the sandwiches, which I don't blame him for being. But I love that Shiwu and Chuyi, like, they start to make the noodles, and the abbot has the conversation with Shen Qiao about his eyesight and everything. It's really, really good. Now, halfway through the episode, for episode 12, Yang Wushi and Shen Qiao get together at the monastery. Instead of Yang Wushi looking for his person, Shen Qiao looking for their person. The novel's a much better setup, in my opinion. Shiwu is featured in the donghua prior, whereas he's a new character here along Chuyi. I think that the novel just, it flows so much better in the novel than it does in the donghua. And, I mean, I like the donghua, but this is just so much better. So, they get everything set up, and then they hear a knock at the door. And I thought for a second, I was like, is it the people coming that's going to kill them? I was like, it seems like it's too early for that. And it was. But in this, Yang Wushi shows up. Shen Qiao takes a lantern. But I love that Shen Qiao, he could recognize Yang Wushi without having to hold the lantern up. He knew who he was just by how he stood and everything. It was so good. It was so good. And then, it's like, the fact, I think what the whole absence makes the heart grow fonder thing, the fact that they weren't walking together this whole time, the fact that they had been apart a little bit, when after everything has happened, after Shen Qiao and the kid dying, after Shen Qiao having to deal with the servants and the donkey sandwiches and all that, and like all the stuff that's made him tired, seeing Yang Wushi, and he's like, are you not happy to see me? And he's like, of course I am. Like, the tenderness of this scene. And then Shen Qiao trips and Yang Wushi catches him by the waist. Are you freaking kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? And he's like, you know, they'd be embarrassed to know that the man as strong as you, like, gets ruffled by a little trip of the stones. I'm like, what? So he shows up, and in the donghua, Yang Wushi looks very uncomfortable being in this domestic situation with these kids and everything. It's all warm and cozy. He's like Ron Swanson in Parks and Rec. He's like, it's too cozy. It's too chummy in here. In this, he just sits down and he's like, okay. And they give him the last bowl of noodles they've already ate and basically leave them together to sit there. And it's so domestic. They're like, here, we can share these noodles. And he's like, did you find who you're looking for? And he's like, no. And it's so good. And even Shen Qiao, he like separates the little radish and the vegetables out because he doesn't think Yang Wushi will approve of the noodles, and he gives them to him. I'm like, it's so good. It's so good. And Shen Qiao's like, have you concluded your business? And he's like, not yet. And he's like, but were you happy to see me? And Shen Qiao's like, yeah, I didn't expect it to be so soon. Why would I not be happy? And the thing is, as they're talking, Yang Wushi is like running his finger around the edge of the bowl, being like, you know, just now you called me your friend. I'm like, yes, he did call you his friend. And he's like, you know, it makes things simpler when we're about and people won't question it. And Yang Wushi's like, well, you know, if you call me your friend, don't you think that the rumors and stuff are going to get out of control? And Shen Qiao's like, well, I don't care. I don't care what people say. You saved my life. And that connection is not just a shallow one. We've spent all this time traveling together. Surely we're friends. Oh my God. Because he's like, well, aren't you afraid that they're going to say you're a degenerate? And he's like, well, I don't care what they say. He's like, and the way that Shen Qiao says it here, he's like, why should I care what others think? The things I've seen and heard since leaving the mountain have moved me deeply. He's like, I've become rather worldly, if you didn't notice. He's like, even more, they've made me understand the path I insisted on. The Tao I practiced in the remote mountains was but a trivial one. This is huge. Shen Qiao is like, he's like being isolated He's like, what a terrible mistake. He's like, I needed to go out and see the world to see how things were. And he's like, Sect Leader Yan, you insist the Lord of Zhou can unite the lands and bring peace so the common folk can be in a better place. He's like, that is a better Dao. He's like, you're actually trying to help people and not just yourself. And Yang Wushi's like, don't flatter me. He's like, I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for the people. And then Shen Qiao says, well, this is kind of like wild. He says that even if it's done with wicked intentions, as long as it leads to good results, that would still count as attaining the Dao, would it not? And it's like, Shen Qiao, that in my mind, I'm like, Shen Qiao, that's like, that's quite a revolutionary idea there, that's saying that like, oh, you may be intending to do bad, but if it ends up being good, then is it truly bad? Sir. And then Yang Wushi stared at him unswervingly. Is like, well, and so are we friends. Now, here's the thing. The audio drama, it's worth it just to get to this scene, because he's like, do you consider us friends? In the novel, in the audio drama, Shen Qiao says, as long as you don't abandon me for higher skies. I love the novel's translation. The novel's translation of saying, if Sect Leader Yan didn't disdain me for trying for someone out of my league. I'm sorry. Excuse me. That is one of the most flirtatious lines we've had in the novel so far, where he's like, well, you're out of my league, but I mean, can you blame a man for trying? And then the way it's described in the novel, a strange expression flitted across his face for an instant. In the audio drama, he gives us like the most tender, briefest of just chuckles. And it's like, that is the moment where Yang Wushi was like, did you just flirt with me? Was there just flirting that just happened? Did that just happen? Now, in the audio drama, they cut it off by him going, well, in that case, I won't be so kind. And then it just ends, and I'm like, oh my God, is he going to take him to Song Jijing? Is it just happening now? Is it just going to happen? And the audio drama just cuts off immediately, and we don't get any idea of what's about to happen. In the novel, it's a little bit more spread out, where he says, this monastery is rather crude. Does it even have a place to sleep? And Shen Qiao is like, well, I can only ask you to suffer through sharing a room with me. Sharing a room with you? Excuse me? We went from 2 separate rooms, not even friends, barely even friends, then somebody bends unexpectedly. Like, what? Excuse me? Are we going to have the 1 bedroom meme? The audio drama did not seem to let that on, but are we about to have that in the novel? Excuse me? I thoroughly enjoyed this chapter set. I've talked for almost an hour about it. I thoroughly enjoyed this chapter set. This was crazy. Okay. Really enjoyed it. Oh my gosh. Well, that was great. I feel that we are about to be not rewarded for, it's like the author was like, wasn't this a great chapter set? Wasn't this lovely? Wasn't this progress with our 2 leads? Wasn't this flirting? Wasn't this romance? Wasn't this wonderful? What if I undid all of that in the next week? What if I did that for you? Would you like that? How about that? Would you like that? Obviously, there's so much mystery surrounding Yang Wushi. I'm curious how it's going to go down, but oh my God. Wild times. I am going to be so ready for next week, and I'm going to be ready to have my heart. I'm excited to see how the novel is going to do it and what is going to be different from the donghua, because it's been so different the last few episodes, but I'm also terrified because I know that not good things are about to happen, and Shen Qiao is about to get his heart broken, and I'm like, Yang Wushi, we made so much progress. Why would you undo it all, sir? If I didn't know what happens at the end of the donghua, which could end up being vastly different in the novel, we'll see. But if I didn't know what happened at the end of the donghua, then I'd be very sad next week, but it's just going to be temporary, right? Right? Anyway, Anyway, I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. These are my favorite chapters so far. These are amazing chapters. I will reread these chapters for sure before next week and just try to soak in all the good energy I can before our hearts are torn apart. Maybe they won't be, but I have a feeling they're about to be, so anyway. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm going to be back really soon with chapters 45, 46, and 47 of 1,000 Autumns, and I'll see you then.